This is the December meeting of the School District of Waukesha Board of Education Teaching and Learning Committee. Can I begin by asking if the meeting's been properly posted?
Yes.
Thank you. And our first item on general business is approval of the teaching and learning minutes from the November 7th meeting. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. All right. We're now at the section of our meeting where there's an opportunity for citizens to speak. We have 9 speakers tonight. Each speaker will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. We will signal the speaker at 2.5 minutes to begin to wrap up their comments. We expect all speakers to honor our time limit, refrain from using any inappropriate language, and be respectful in their comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at future board or committee meetings. Speakers are here to address the board, not the audience. This board committee does not endorse any comments made by members of the community here tonight. We'd like to remind our community members of the impact of their words on others and that our children are watching. We commit to communicating with you in respectful and productive ways and ask that you do the same. We also expect that the audience will be respectful of the speaker and of the board and refrain from responding with verbal comments, cheering, applause, or other behavior that will detract from the meeting. Please note that no obstructions can be created between the board and the audience. Visual aids cannot be used, and the area behind the speaker and podium should be clear during public comment. Also, in order to respect our speakers and meeting participants, please silence your cell phones. Our first speaker tonight will be Judith Amorson, followed by Ashley Von Strobel. Welcome.
Thing. It's green. Okay. My name is Judith A. Morrison, and I'm here tonight to ask you to keep the PLP programs in middle schools. We have a current 5th grader for whom the environment of learning is the most important thing, and because of that, we had to take her out of the school district of Waukesha this year. We are thinking that she will do well in a personalized learning program like Quest, but she will not do well in a regular learning environment at middle school. If you take Quest away, we will have to continue her schooling outside of the school district of Waukesha. We are big supporters of public schools, and in order to make the school district of Waukesha attractive, you should offer more programs and be more innovative, not less. In addition, the homeowners in Waukesha relies on your skills in running the school district to maintain our home values. If you continue cutting programs, it will affect those home values in addition to our children's education. All children learn differently and learn best in different environments. Please honor that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ashley Von Strobel, followed by Dave Dringenberg.
Sorry. Is it okay to go? Okay. Good evening. I'm here tonight to ask 4 things from you regarding the administration's desire to continue personal learning programs. First, time. While I am grateful for the pause in taking action on the proposal, I ask at the bare minimum that you put off any vote until the problems are properly investigated from every angle and the necessary time is given to examine all solutions. 2, due diligence. There were many aspects to last week's presentation and discussion that appeared to be cherry-picked, or worse, they had no answers. These actions have led to mistrust in our district's administration. Taking the time to examine the data, including all aspects of testing and enrollment, in addition, gathering statistics from the alumni of the PL programs from the last 15 years of its existence. What better way to assess the success of PL programs than from the alumni? I also ask you to speak to all PL program teachers. It came to our attention last week that the administration implied that the frustrations were from PL program teachers, when in fact that may not have been the case. I also ask that you ensure every PL program teacher is surveyed anonymously. 3, transparent communication. In the way in which the administration communicated to the parents in the time frame in which they did, and the lack of transparency was inexcusable. And now, in less than 3 weeks, they have generated mistrust and a lack of faith in our district. In addition, by not communicating with parents of fourth graders and younger, they have not been given the opportunity to be part of the conversation. It is also asked that newly acquired statistics and data points be made public. With this as the starting point, the only way forward is with complete transparent communication and within appropriate timeframes. 4, out-of-the-box thinking. SDW has shown that they do understand students have different learning styles and interests by offering PL programs, STEM, charter schools within the high schools, e-Achieve, and partnership with Montessori School. This is the very reason why I reside in Waukesha, so that our 6th grader and 4th grader could be students of flight. Since every child or teen's needs are different, an individual approach to education is what is most effective for my two, understanding that it may not be best for all. To ensure the success of every student, I ask for creative, viable solutions to identify problems. Lean on parents, teachers, students, and even the community. Reach out to other districts, statewide or nationally, to learn of different approaches and solutions. I understand the task in front of you is not an easy one, and I appreciate your time and attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dave Dringenberg. Before you start, I just want to point out that I think we have a volume problem with our timer. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the time. Last Tuesday, I had an opportunity to attend the presentation about the personalized learning program at Butler and the discontinuation of that program. I'm grateful that Mr. Borowski and Ms. Kozlowski and Ms. Voigt were able to make it and to witness the presentation from Dr. Siebert, Ms. Ginnerman, and Ms. Garcia. Fortunately for the 100-plus parents, students, and educators who attended, the administration failed to make a compelling argument for sunsetting the program. We were given insufficient and seemingly cherry-picked data that was only briefly presented on screen. The reasoning behind the closure seemed based around a lack of creativity and a desire to make the program work by upper administration. When parents were given time to ask questions, they were often met with answers from admin that were evasive, defensive, and many times questions were met with silence. The fact is that Dr. Siebert, Ms. Ginnerman, and Ms. Garcia failed to rise to the occasion to sway parents. I have 2 children here in the district, both of which are here tonight, one of whom is in a PLP. I'm under the impression that my children's education is a partnership between the students, the adults in the home, the teachers, as well as the board and administration. It's disturbing to me that SDW doesn't seem to approach my children's education that same way. At no point before last Tuesday had my family's opinion around the matter of shuttering this program been considered by the district. No one asked to hear how my daughter is doing in Quest, how the program is causing her to thrive as a student in new and challenging ways. In fact, by show of hands last week at the meeting, one person raised their hand to indicate that the district had asked their opinion. One person. That's unacceptable. Dr. Siebert informed a parent advisory council last February, that it only took 12 parents to get rainbows out of classrooms. Certainly, if that's the case, and if parental rights truly exist in this district, then the amount of people that have spoken and continue to speak should sway you. Anything less than the full support of PLPs tonight by board members, including any tabling of the discussion, will likely cause the program to die on the vine. With registration now open for 5th graders, parents are uncertain or unlikely to commit to a program with an uncertain future. Please listen to parents and deny the administration further conversation about sunsetting this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Blake Lewis, followed by Sam Shepard.
Good evening. My daughter is in sixth grade at Quest. She entered the program. We heard absolutely nothing about it from anybody until we found out through a grandmother of an eighth grader in this program at Quest. So when they talk about enrollment dropping, I think that is a fallacy. I think they haven't done anything to encourage the membership of Quest. Frankly, we were registered at Pewaukee and a couple other schools. We weren't planning on going to Butler until we found out about this Quest program. And it has been everything that was advertised to us. And we talked to the teachers ahead of time. And I tried to ferret out what the motivation is at this board or at this meeting at Butler the other week, whether it was money, whether it was a failure of the program. And it came out that it wasn't a failure by head shaking. But there's nothing, I can't figure out the motivation. So I have to assume it's money. But when I think about the fact that there are tons of programs for disadvantaged students and the students that need extra help in learning, but there is nothing for advanced students other than this program. And this program also allows the students to excel at their own rate. So even if your student is extremely gifted, and I wish my daughter was in that, but she's a very good student, but there's a way for them to be challenged as opposed to a general education in a typical classroom. And why they want to banish that is completely foreign to me. My daughter is thriving and loves the program. We like it, and we'd like to continue. With that said, I wanted to at least compliment the board. I worked avidly to get each and every one of you actually elected in all my circles of friends, my family, and a lot of people through Waukesha. And I would love to continue to support you as well. And until I hear a reason other than it seems like a pain in the rear for the administration, not even the teachers. I've talked to 3 of the
30 seconds.
teachers about this, and none of them gave me the perspective that was portrayed by the Dr. Siebert and Ms. Jennerman and Ms. Garcia. They were acting like the teachers were overworked and couldn't prepare properly. But my experience is the students are thriving, and we'd love to have the opportunity for other students
Your
to join
time
this
is up.
program.
Thank you. Next is Sam Shepard, followed by Andy Wendt.
Hello, my name is Sam Shepard. I have a 7th grader at Horning in the flight program and a 5th grader at Hillcrest who's so looking forward to being able to be in the flight program. Our experience with the flight program has been exceptional. Our son has loved it, and it really has seemed like the feather in our cap as Waukesha schools. And so it's baffling to me and others here why that would be on the chopping block. The flight program at Horning has been very popular with steady or increasing numbers despite a lack of advertising by the school district and administration for parents. It was not at all advertised even that it's open now, the application is, but no one's telling the kids that. And if you had a 5th grader as your oldest, how would you even know? So there's some concern that there's some sabotage going on or a deliberate effort to cut this program off at the knees without telling anyone about it, or that it's going to potentially sunset. The school district, after the meeting last week, sent out a FAQ document, I believe, or frequently asked questions about personalized learning. And through their own admission, there were just a variety of concerns about what was shared at that meeting. So they followed up on some questions that were asked, such as, how do kids in these personalized learning programs perform in high school? And the answer from this email was, we have not collected data on this topic. Seems like an important thing that parents wanted to know. If you want to close the program, how are the students doing? How are they doing compared to students who aren't in a personalized learning program at the same middle school? We were just told they don't have that data, or have perhaps no motivation to find it, or no interest in finding it from the meeting it was requested until this was sent out. How are these kids doing the last 15 years? We don't have that data. Did you ask parents what they think about closing the program? We did not survey parents, was the answer. I would request, as others, that these programs not be immediately sunset, which is the plan. And even if the metrics are, oh, they'll keep going for a few years for the current students if there's enrollment, well, you're creating a situation where there's no enrollment, or very little, because you're not advertising it. And you couldn't possibly be unaware that's what you're doing. I would propose that some of the solutions that you've looked at or claim to have looked at in this document be implemented first. It's actually wonderful solutions that you sent out here. When someone asked, what other solutions did you look at? You said you considered some other solutions that would answer some of your concerns.
30 seconds.
Thank you, disembodied voice. Some other questions, like some other options, like the curriculum was a huge concern, so how about purchasing a special curriculum or creating a position to oversee the coordination of these programs and some standardization, since that seemed to be the repeated objection, that there was no standardization. But these were only listed as considered solutions. Considered for a second, and you could say you considered it. So I'm concerned about the bad faith efforts to get rid of this, but I'd also like the board to strongly consider
Your time is up.
further examination. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Andy Went, followed by Nikki Hoke.
Hello. My name is Andy Went. I have an 8th grader in the Compass program at Les Paul and a 2nd grader at Summit View. We're really looking forward to the opportunity for our younger son to be able to take advantage of the program, which it appears he won't be able to now. Our son was actually able to do some projects in the Compass program on nuclear fusion and computer programming. I doubt that he would have opportunities to do projects like that if he wasn't in a specialized program like this. I have a rhetorical question and an actual question that I'd like to see answered. First, how do you expect enrollment to improve district-wide when you cut programs like this? Other people have already asked that question, but I think it's important. And then, when did the school policies actually change that required you to consider closing these programs? Because if they didn't change, then how were these programs able to exist in the first place? That's all I've got.
Thank you. Nikki, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. Okay. Followed by Eric Eggers.
I think I'm a little short. Okay. Hi. I'm here as a parent of a current 6th grader in flight at Horning and a 9th grader at South who went through the flight program. I'm here requesting that you reconsider the recommendation to end personalized learning programs in our middle schools. I believe the value and opportunity these programs have and do provide far outweighs any stumbling blocks or issues that have been mentioned as reasons to discontinue them. I wasn't sure what would work best to make my point, because just as our students do, everything that I tell you will affect you differently. Everything you hear will make a connection with you differently in your mind. Is it a personal testimonial or statistics and data that help you understand and make you curious to know more? I'm sure you've heard many examples over the last week or even tonight of students thriving, loving learning, and even sometimes being saved in their learning journey because of these programs. My 9th grader had seamless opportunities for excelled achievement in flight. My current 6th grader has already gained enough comfort to attend school each day with confidence, when just a year ago this wasn't the case for him. In a perfect world, yes, this would be the story for all of our students in the district. Hopefully we are moving in that direction. But the fact remains that these opportunities already exist right now in our middle schools. As participants then, of course, we're confused as to why these successful and unique programs would not be promoted as an offering in our district, just as the dual language, STEM, and academy programs are. And we're confused as to why our input was not sought. That such a recommendation could be made with no comment allowed or survey taken feels as though we've been disregarded. The current recommendation FAQ that was sent last week contains no data on student achievement in the PLP programs post-middle school. There is no data on how students feel about middle school while they're currently in a PLP versus a general education program. There's no explanation in the FAQ about the real differences that do exist between PLPs and the STEM and Montessori education that's being promoted right now as an alternative, because they're not the same programs. Not to mention, as charter schools, there's no transportation options for these alternatives. There's no data on special education supports that are not needed because of these programs. There are several options that were listed
30
in the
seconds.
FAQ to address administrative concerns that were explored but not explained as to why they're not viable. As we all know or have heard or have experienced, middle school is a different beast altogether. I often say that middle school teachers and staff are like supernatural beings that walk among us doing the most difficult work of guiding and teaching the strange in-between of a human. And if these teachers were overloaded, why have we not addressed this sooner?
Your time is up.
Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Eggers, followed by Hans Wendt.
I just want to quickly add my voice to the chorus of support for keeping these personalized learning programs around. Everything I've heard about them is positive and beneficial, and I would like for my daughter, currently in 5th grade, to have the chance to take advantage of those benefits. I was at the information meeting last week, and I also thank the board members who made the effort to attend. But nobody in that audience spoke in support of these cuts. So please consider what is best for the success of our students and the opportunities you can give them. Please listen to the parents and the teachers and make the right decisions this month. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker tonight is Hans Wendt.
Hello, I'm Hans. I'm an 8th grade student who attends the Compass program at Les Paul. And I'd just like to say some of the things that, some of the opportunities that Compass has been able to provide to me. Compass has taught me numerous real life skills like time management, how to conduct research, organization, teamwork. Without Compass, I probably wouldn't have the confidence to come up and speak here to you guys. Compass is a tight-knit community that you couldn't find in other programs. I've developed relationships with other students. And I think that I've had opportunities for learning material that I wouldn't have had elsewhere. I've been able to explore topics at my own pace that even in advanced classes might not be offered due to the fact that they're not at your own pace learning, but instead just a higher level class. I really have enjoyed Compass thus far, and I hope that there will be opportunities for future students to attend the program as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice job. All right, thank you to all of our speakers tonight. Our next item of business is the approval of the revisions to Board Policy 2340, field trips and other district-sponsored trips. This policy was discussed at the last few meetings. It was brought forward for action last month We asked for a little more clarity on the administrative process, and so it's back to us this month seeking final approval. Dr. Siebert?
Oh, thank you, Dr. Piasek. So we did, Stacy and I worked together on adding some clarity, and we would use a 6-week advance notice for requesting in and out-of-state overnight travel that would be administratively approved. That would include co-curricular trips. And then the out-of-country travel for competitions along with the non-curricular related overnight trips and overnight trips to Alaska or Hawaii that would be Teaching and Learning Committee approved would require at least 6 months of advance warning. And we feel confident with both of those dates that we could certainly, for the administrative perspective, remind our athletic directors and our coaches at the start of each season of what those requirements were so that we can meet those 6-week pieces. And then in almost every instance for the Teaching and Learning Committee approved types of trips, those have become known to us far in advance of 6 months, generally because of the need for significant fundraising. So we're happy to answer any questions.
And just as a matter of clarification, I think after last month, the only change that came through was that first section that's with respect to the 6-week
That's
notice.
correct.
And that was, I think, appropriate given the 1-month cycle on our committee meetings. If there is something that needs to come to the committee for some unanticipated reason, that we don't run into a problem where there's not a meeting scheduled.
Absolutely.
I think that-
With the 6 weeks, we would always run into a meeting cycle, correct?
Thank you for putting some thought into the process around that. I think this just creates a lot of efficiency with building level approvals, and we've built in the right level of exception when it's needed, so
Wonderful.
I'm not seeing any additional comments or questions. All right. Then I'd be looking for a motion to approve the policy revision.
Also move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our first content area is social studies, and we'll be having an update tonight on the elementary social studies programming.
Coming up is Melissa Yao, who is our Director of Elementary Teaching and Learning, and Dee Garcia, our Director of Middle School Teaching and Learning. They have a quick update regarding the social studies curriculum.
Pardon me, I have new technology.
Always
Well, if you
exciting,
were
but
here
takes a
for-
moment. If you're here for student services, you got a nice family picture of of a screen behind as we were transitioning. So take your time.
All right. So in the year 2021, we began our pilot for our curricular review in social studies. And then in 2021, we spent that year really digging in, creating our scope and sequence with teams of teachers digging in to aligning it to the standards with the resource that we had adopted of impact. And then last year was our first year of implementation. And so we wanted to come tonight to share with you how that first year went. So we had lots of opportunities for teachers to engage in learning. So last school year, we had learning at our Summer Institute and Winter Institute, along with opportunities for teachers to engage in TDPs, online options for them. And then we also continued throughout the year to enhance our resources on Blackboard. This summer, based on feedback from teachers. We sent out surveys twice during last year to gather information from teachers. We created some updates this summer that we would like to share with you. So one of the first things is we want to make sure that our time that students have in our classrooms are engaging and that they have time not just to read and research, but they also have time with manipulatives and resources. So we increased our opportunity with maps and globes and compasses and those hands-on resources for students to make the lessons even more engaging. And then we also created for this past summer with a group of teachers vocabulary cards in both English and in Spanish at kindergarten and first grade. So those were two requests that came out of both kindergarten and then first grade for those vocabulary cards. So they're cards that can go up in the classroom. They can also be used as manipulatives with students.
So something else that's really exciting for us is that we included in the kindergarten and first grade explicit opportunities for students to transfer the learning that they're doing in their literacy classroom to their content area classroom of social studies. As we know, in social studies, students are not only investigating, they're also doing a lot of reading, writing, and speaking. And so we wanted to take the opportunity for students to find the skills that they're learning in their, particularly in the area of phonics and word study, in the areas of social studies. So we wrote specific language objectives for our students to be able to achieve as they are going through their lessons, as well as explicit connections to some of these skills that you see before you, like a focus on the WH words, a focus on plural words, discriminating against or between shun and shun, a variety of skills that are in English. While this was intended to support, in particular, our students that are learning English as a second language, what we have found is that students who have learned something in one environment, when they transfer it to another environment, are demonstrating real capacity and real self-knowledge. So this has been an exciting addition. We are currently considering whether we are making these similar revisions to grades 2 through 5, but we will be able to update in the future if we're able to make that move. Going forward, also, we made very explicit connections to some very key AVID strategies. AVID has been an instructional framework and resource that we've been fairly committed to for the last 15 years. It includes students becoming increasingly more self-determined. And so some of the practices that we have added include opportunities for students to self-monitor their learning, students to collaborate, specific practices that students use for accountable talk and accountable discussion so that all children are able to engage. We've embedded all of those throughout the units, and what we've done is we've focused on strategies that can then be brought to automaticity so that in following years, the teachers that are in third grade know that the second graders already know how to use strategies like numbered heads together and turn and talk and think, frame, pair, share, etc. So in addition to that, we have given teachers some supports in terms of how they can look at student work for the purpose of reporting to parents on how students are progressing. We have made some specific connections between the units of study and the activities and which types of activities might be used for formative assessment to give a check of progress and which might be used for more of a summative assessment and reporting of a grade. So those are some upgrades that we've made in the past year that we're quite proud of and have gotten some good feedback from teachers on.
And the last piece that we wanted to bring to you was some data on how students did on the forward exam with a little bit less than 1 year of implementation of the program. So looking at the data here, two areas that we really wanted to celebrate was the increase of our students of color. So from 2022 to 2023, students went from 23.5% to 49.5%. So that's an increase that we really want to celebrate. That specific population moved above the state average. Another area that we are celebrating is our students with a disability also showed an increase from 33% to 37%. The other areas of proficiency of students overall, ELs are economically disadvantaged, either dropped by a percentage point or stayed fairly stagnant. So areas that we want to continue to look at and monitor.
So the first year of an implementation is never perfect. A lot of times teachers are doing a fair amount of learning and kind of navigating through resources. So while we're enlightened to think that these resources are bringing some access to students, we know that we still have continued areas of growth. So when we're looking at the strands of social studies, which are behavior, economics, political science, history, and geography, what we're finding is that we have above the state average in all of the areas with the strands. What we wanted to look for is if there was any discrepancy that might suggest that perhaps we needed to build in even more units of economics or even more units on political science, et cetera. And what we can see is that we do have some discrepant areas. Students tend to be doing better on the 4th grade test in geography, which we were pleasantly surprised by, and maybe say not so well in political science. However, when we look at the state averages, we're seeing the same patterns at the state level. This could be due to a variety of reasons in terms of how many items were asked of the student in the particular area, the particular rigor of the item that was assessed and asked. So when we look at this, we're not seeing a cause for action right now, but we'll continue to monitor and, of course, review over time as we go through the length of the adoption.
Now I'd like to turn it over to any questions that you have.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
Thank you. I love the data. Just a quick question. So taking a look at the 4th grade students 2022 and 4th grade students 2023, these are separate classes, correct? This wasn't
Correct.
4th grade coming in. It's 4th grade, a new class of 4th grade.
Correct. They only take it in 4th grade. They do not take social studies in 5th grade. So it's 4th, 8th, and that's
10th.
And 10th, yeah.
Okay. What are the teachers saying about the curriculum? How's it going? So we're starting year 2.
Better than last year. We have found, right, there's an increase in rigor of what's being asked, what students are being asked to read, and so we know that that is a reciprocal process with teaching instructionally in our areas of phonics and reading and writing. They're getting more familiar with the resources and opportunities to engage the students, as we talked about with turn and talk, and now that they know the resources better, understanding a lot of the resources that we have chosen, we've been really intentional of making sure that these resources include what we call the AVID strategies that are best practices. So if you look in our social studies books, there's many times 2-column notes, 3-column notes, and so teachers are just, have had the time to learn these and getting better every time. And once again, then last year we surveyed them twice to what are you seeing the needs on for the areas of what do you need to learn more about, what supports do you need, and so that's how those curricular additions and revisions came in, was based on teacher feedback. So we'll do another survey again this year that will help drive any revisions that need to be made or enhancements.
And then the last question I have for you is the constant focus of language throughout all of the curriculum. We're not looking at, obviously, ELA here, but are we seeing any improvement in correlation as we start to look across the sequence of coursework?
What I would say about that is that we've made intentional efforts in all areas, including mathematics in particular, but as well as in social studies, to make sure that students are seeing an opportunity to transfer their skills, because transfer is really where it's at. You want to have a student that where they're learning it in the original environment, that doesn't just stop there, but they're able to take that skill and apply it in new and different ways. So we're encouraged that we've built a system that teachers can use that will help to guide them in their instruction. I don't think that we've seen particular outcomes yet that we can talk about, but I would say this. Just very recently, I was at Prairie Elementary School. It's not a multilingual school, and a teacher came and got me and said, hey, come to my classroom. I want you to see the work that my students have done. And she brought me outside by her coat hooks and showed me all of the different work that the kids were doing, and she had great enthusiasm. She talked about being really well supported with figuring out what she should focus on and what were like the key priorities, including the types of work samples that she should be collecting from students and supporting students as they develop over time. I don't know that we had teachers knowing that we were in the building, coming to find us to say, hey, let me showcase my work enthusiastically to you. So that's encouraging. Of course, we would love to do even deeper work to connect the curriculum across multiple content areas. And I think as we begin to see how everything intersects, we'll have more opportunities to do that over time, including the integration of things like reading tables and graphs and things like that.
Well, it's good. I just like to see how the connection and watching that's a focus that we're seeing carry through that. So thank you. This was good.
Mrs. Koenig.
I just want to thank you too for putting this data together. As I'm looking at this chart, there may be a reason to kind of pause and say, oh, it wasn't as good as last year, in this category or that category. When I see the closeness of, because as someone that has implemented many curriculums over the years, I know that first year, it is hard, for the teachers to wrap their head around it and to really, see what's there, make it their own, and then go with it. Usually year 2 and 3 are the years that you just take off. You're like, okay, I got this. I know exactly what I'm doing, where I'm going. The fact that, within the proficiency, we are less than a percentage point away. The other area, 28% versus 28%. Economic disadvantage, less than 2 percentage points. This is huge when you look at just the closeness when you're implementing a new curriculum, that you haven't lost ground, because oftentimes you can lose significant percentage points the first year and then bounce back those years to come. This is pretty, impressive. What is shocking to me in the category of students of color, from last year to this year, they've doubled their proficiency. And to me, do you have any idea? Is it the focus on the language, or what do you think is such a factor in that category alone?
My opinion, which is not based on data that I've examined, but my opinion is that in the areas of multilingual instruction, social studies is taught every day over a course of 6 weeks for an hour, in which literacy is also part of that instruction. That is how literacy is developed. As students might be in a Spanish literacy unit, they would have English and social studies. When we provide people with high quality instructional materials and support in being able to use those materials, and they do use them, this is the kind of outcome we would expect. Previous to this, we were using a homegrown source of curricular resources, very loosely aligned to any sort of standard or common assessment or anything like that. The short answer is no. It doesn't surprise me that when you give people a Cadillac, they want to drive it. So that's my presumption. We haven't dug in further to the data to really examine that, but I would hope that that is what we would see, and that we would see that with all of our populations as we continue to use the resources.
I would also say I believe the format is through inquiry, and so along the way, students are having time to explore, go deeper in some areas. They have a culminating project that they're working on. I'm trying to really make it engaging and as hands-on as you can as well. And we picked a resource. I think that all students can learn about new things and also see themselves in the curricular resource. I think has been another piece that could, you could possibly correlate to that.
When we initially adopted, we talked a long time about the type of materials that we were bringing to students. One of the key materials is a student inquiry journal, which is a journal that students not only interact with in reading, but are taking notes and actually responding to reading by writing. And you're thinking like your youngest learners are doing this, but it's all scaffolded through a ton of conversation and hands-on manipulation of concepts and images and things like that. I think the whole resource kind of ties everything together to really have supported what we are seeing initially in the data that we have here. There's just more time on task, more time in task.
Well, for someone that taught that homegrown curriculum in the district for many, 20 years, I look at the curriculum we have now, and it is definitely more rigorous. And I can see that, within the next year or two, I think we're going to see quite an improvement, you know, as teachers get comfortable with it, as students get used to the format. And even in my school visits that I've been at, yeah, I usually visit, you know, on Thursdays, I'm seeing a lot of teachers doing the same thing. They're pulling me over and showing me the writing that the kids are doing. Hey, look at this, look what we're working on. They're extremely excited, especially about the writing. And that, I have not seen that in years, so it's definitely, you know, you're crossing it over, and I'm starting to see that bridge become very strong now between those skills.
Mr. Zenobia?
Thank you. So, Ms. Garcia, I think I heard you say something, but if I'm incorrect, please correct me. You were talking about the curriculum helping teachers as, you know, they were in grade last year to this year. And was it that the teachers got to know the students better, their work better, and so that the next teacher had some idea of where that student was the prior year? Is that kind of what you were talking about as far as what the curriculum was allowing them maybe to see things back into their last year that now as a new teacher has them in the next grade? They're seeing.
So it's always nice to have something called the scope and sequence. And a scope and sequence allows you to look back and see where a student might have had like a guaranteed experience. For example, I know in first grade, students learn how to add and subtract two-digit numbers. It's really good to know that there has been instruction on that and that at least 80 to 90% of your students can do that. When you're welcoming, say, second graders into your classroom and you're expecting that there's going to be some background knowledge that you can link into, you can help to support them as they bridge that to what they're going to learn next. It's that kind of thing. So when I was referring to AVID, I think, in referring to students building a repertoire of practices that you can no longer, you don't need to teach anymore, you can prompt and they do it. For example, Mr. Zenobia and Ms. Koenig, I'd like you to turn and talk to each other, and students as young as 5 years old can turn and talk to each other and talk about the task and not talk about recess, but stay on task. They know the success criteria for doing some of that. Well, imagine a student that goes through and learns a repertoire of 12 different skills in that area by the time that they leave elementary school. Of course, they learn many more. But if they have a repertoire of those types of things, those are things that we don't need to explicitly teach year after year after year, but kind of become how students do as they get older. And so we can add on more layers of complexity and more, I think, independence is what we're looking for, and the opportunity for greater collaboration, which makes kids very happy.
Thank you for
You're welcome.
clarifying.
Thank you for the update. One of the things I loved about this curriculum when we reviewed and approved it back in 2021 was how the reading level progressed along with the grade level and the social studies content. And I think to Ms. Koenig's point, the subsequent years will represent years where the students have actually been immersed in the same sequence over multiple years. And you can see the logic of how it builds on each other, how the standards are actually built into that. And I expect to see even more significant outcomes. I always say hope is not a strategy, so we're not going to sit back and hope. I think we're really anticipating that as the teachers in the classroom become more comfortable with the materials and the students start to sense some familiarity with the materials, that they'll progress at an even greater pace than probably what we've seen so far. And I think this aligns well to also to some of the literacy components that have been built in at the elementary level. So, and we're asking a lot of staff with all of this new curriculum. We're asking a lot of students too, because we're just changing the way that they're engaging with the material. But it's good to see some, some nuggets of success. I do believe that as a district, we can significantly outpace some of the state averages, and I'm anticipating that we can see some of that over the next couple of years too. So thank you for the update.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're moving on to our key performance indicators, and we'll be having a review of the DPI report cards for the district. Mrs. Genderman.
So as we switch over with technology and people, I just want to introduce Jamie Kupkovitz, who's the Director of Academic Student Services, to share a little bit more about the district and school report cards. Prior to our in-person meeting today, you had an opportunity to view a recording that had a little bit more of a historical perspective on the DPI report card, since we've had those for several years, and it seems that each year there's a little bit of a change with the report cards. Also in the recording, a brief overview was provided of just our current results. So at this point, before Jamie shares a little bit more in-depth information, I just want to share that all of the school report card information, along with other assessment data, is used as part of our continuous improvement process throughout the district. Each school does have we call them SAIL plans, or in other terms, like a school improvement, a school plan, as far as their goals and what they're working on, strategic actions and monitoring and validating strategic actions and progress monitoring towards student increased results. So I'll turn it over to Jamie, and she'll share a little bit more about the report cards and results.
All right, thank you, Jen, and good evening, everybody. So as Jen mentioned, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into our report card data, specifically in the areas of achievement and growth, and we're going to look at how our data compares relative to those KPIs that were set for the district. So as you can see, the first slide up here, our KPI was that 100% of our schools would meet expectations or higher on the DPI report card. So I'm happy to announce that we have met our KPI of 100% of our schools in the school district of Waukesha, meeting or exceeding expectations. So as you can see on the next following slides, listed is the data from our elementary and secondary schools with their overall rating and category scores. So please remember that an overall rating score is just one measure on the report card. And as I mentioned, we'll go over some more specifics about the data that is included on the report card. So just to summarize, out of 12 elementary schools, 4 schools saw a rating increase, while 8 indicated a decrease from the 21-22 school report card. STEM maintained their score, while the 3 middle schools decreased in their overall scores. Out of our 3 high schools, 2 of those saw an overall rating increase. E-Achieve saw an increase, while the Academy of Health and Engineering Prep saw a decrease. So our district, like I mentioned, falls within the meets expectations category with an overall score of 67.0, and that gives us 3 out of 5 total stars. All right, so we're going to move into looking at our achievement more specifically. So just as a reminder, achievement shows how the level of knowledge and skills of students in the district or school, when you're looking at the school report card, compares to the state academic standards. So we are looking at the district's overall data in the area of achievement and growth for tonight. Okay. All right, so there are a couple things that we can look at when we're looking at the data in the area of achievement. So first, what is our district score and how does this compare against the state average of other K-12 school districts? So our district received that score of 60.2 in the area of achievement in English language arts and mathematics. So this is an increase from last year's score of 59.6. When we look at the state comparison average of where we are performing relative to those other K-12 schools in the state, we are above. So if we break that down even further into ELA and mathematics performance for our district, in the area of ELA, we scored a 61.2. So again, comparatively, this is above the state average of 60.1. So when we look at the area of mathematics, our score is at 59.2, and this is above the average of a 57.2 of the state. Okay. A priority area in this area of a 60.2 translates to being similar to or higher than 45.8% of other districts in the state. Second, we can look at our results by student group achievement. So we can see, for example, which groups of students in ELA and math need support. We can also see which groups, compared to the prior year, indicated a positive and negative change. We can also look at performance levels by year noticing any proficiency trends, some of which we discussed while looking at our data from that last committee meeting. So as you can see from this graphic, out of the assessed groups, a majority of our groups in the area of ELA indicated a positive change, as indicated by that upward arrow. Out of the assessed groups in the area of mathematics, a majority of our groups also indicated another positive change. Importantly, it is our goal for all of our student groups in Waukesha School District to indicate a positive change in both the areas of ELA and mathematics achievement, and we will continue to work towards meeting that goal. So lastly, in this area, we can look at student group performance levels by year, noticing which groups of students need support and the impact of group performance on overall performance. If you recall, again, some of that data was shared during our last committee meeting. So when we look at the area of ELA, we can see that upward trend in both proficient and advanced percentages for the last 3 years. Remember that greater weight is placed on your current or most recent year's data and the years where you have more tested students. So, however, importantly to note is we are continuing to work towards the goal of having all of our student groups perform within the advanced and proficient ranges. So the 22-23 data indicates that 43% of our students are currently falling within this range. So when we compare that to the state's level of proficiency, that is at 40.4%. So in the area of mathematics, again, we are seeing an upward trend in students performing in those categories. And we, again, continue to work towards the goal of having all of our student groups perform in the proficient and advanced ranges. So the 22-23 data indicates that 41.2% of our students are currently falling within this range. So when we compare that to the states, that is at 38.5%. So now we're going to move over to growth. So as a reminder, growth gives schools and districts that single measure that summarizes how rapidly students are gaining knowledge and skills from year to year. Okay. So this graphic is just a reminder of when we're looking at the value add growth measure that is included on the report card. As you can see from the graphic, this measure takes into account the actual student growth compared to the actual average growth for similar students. So if the student's actual performance is higher than that of the average growth of other students, that student is considered to have value add growth or is growing at a faster rate. So that's indicated on the first graphic there. So the second one would indicate that there's slower rate than average. Okay. All right, in the area of growth, our district received a score of 66 in English language arts and mathematics. This is an increase from last year's score of 64.1. So growth also provides a state comparison average, and we can again break this down into ELA performance and mathematics performance. So when we look in the area of ELA, our district, we scored a 67.9, which is above the state average of 66.0. In the area of mathematics, we scored 64.1. This is below the state average of 66.0. So a priority area score of 66.0 translates into being similar to or higher than 58.9% of other K-12 districts in the state. So we can also look at our groups to see which of those groups are improving rapidly and which groups are struggling to improve. So again, our goal is for all of our student groups to indicate average or higher than average scores, which is indicated by the blue shading on this graphic. So when we look at student group value added data, we can determine the rate of improvement that our groups are making. So average growth is indicated by a score of 3.0. Above average growth is indicated above 3.0, and then below average growth would be minus 3.0. So again, value add helps quantify how much growth students are making over time by factoring for things that are generally beyond a school's ability to control. So when we look at our district data, we can see that all combined groups improved above the average, so at a 3.1 in the area of ELA. In the area of mathematics, all combined students grew below the average, just below at 2.9. When ELA and mathematics growth is examined, we did not demonstrate as much growth across all students groups in the area of mathematics when compared to ELA. All right, so we're now going to look at our target groups. And just as a reminder, this is designated to help schools see their own gaps between students scoring in the lowest quartile and the rest of their student body. Okay. So this priority area combines component scores for achievement, growth, chronic absenteeism, attendance, or graduation rates. All right, so as we can see from our data, so we received a score of 58.7, so this is a decrease from last year's score of 63. So our district scored in the following areas: achievement at 18.3, growth a 67.0, chronic absenteeism a 75.9, and graduation an 89.6. So this priority area helps us to identify again where our gaps are with our lowest performing students and the rest of the population. Keep in mind that there will always be a bottom quartile of performers. So when we look at our district, we can also see from these graphics how wide the gap is between our lowest performing students in the district. So when you look at the graphic, we can see a significant difference in the areas of achievement for both ELA and mathematics when we look at our target group compared to our non-target group. In the areas of growth, we do not see that significant gap, as both the target and non-target groups are the same at 67.9. In the areas of chronic absenteeism and graduation, we can see a slight difference in chronic absenteeism with the target and non-target groups compared, and a difference in graduation with those two groups compared as well. All right, so we're going to look at our last measure, which is on track to graduation. So just as a reminder, the on track to graduation is an indicator of how successful students are in achieving important milestones that lead to success, which include the areas of chronic absenteeism, graduation rate, or attendance with no schools with a graduating grade 12. Third grade ELA achievement, and eighth grade mathematics achievement. So just as a few reminders, attendance and chronic absenteeism are highly correlated with student achievement. And then our third grade ELA ability is linked to later academic performance across content areas, graduation, and college enrollment. Our eighth grade mathematics ability is correlated with leading to success in a variety of high school classes as well. In the area of on track to graduation, we had a score of 82.8. This is below our district score from last year of 84.3. So comparatively to other K-12 schools in the state, our district score was the same or higher than 35.5 of other districts in the state. So looking at the educational milestones of chronic absenteeism, graduation, third grade ELA, and eighth grade mathematics data that are important for success, you can see how we scored as follows. So I will go back. So at chronic absenteeism, we scored an 85.5, and this is above the statewide average of 82.0. At graduation, we scored a 93.6. This is above the statewide average, which was a 91.8. In third grade ELA, and we did look at some of this data as well at our last committee meeting, we scored a 60.8, and the state comparison was at 56.8. So our score was above the statewide average. So in our eighth grade math performance, we were a 50.5, and the state comparison was a 50.8. So this was just below the statewide average.
As Jamie has shared the results and more detailed information about each of the areas of the school report card, I just wanted to point out that, our results here as a all the schools feed into the district total. And so we are really just points away from that next highest rating category. So that would be a nice, thing to look forward to, looking as our next steps. Obviously, in continuous improvement, just because you meet your goal doesn't mean you've achieved or you're done. But that's something that we've been talking about as a team with student services as well as teaching and learning. The majority of our schools are already exceeding expectation or have improved over time. And so as you see here, and it was shared earlier, just which schools have that historic piece and where they land right now. Like I said earlier, regardless of where everyone falls, we use this data as far as our continuous improvement plan and looking at those groups, and that's where the principals and teams really look and dive in and draft their goals for the next year along with their strategic actions. We do have one other KPI to report on, but depending on, we can kind of pause and discuss that or move on to the other KPI, which is really the report card ranking number 1 among the 10 largest districts. So we can pause and have a conversation or just move forward with that and then.
Why don't we go ahead with that, and then we can take it all together as discussion. Is that okay?
All right, so as Jen mentioned, our last KPI indicator for tonight is that we would rank number 1 on our DPI report card among the 10 largest districts in Wisconsin. So you can see from this graphic here where our current ranking is. Our score of 67.0 put us at the 3rd ranking spot, just below Madison and Eau Claire Area School District. All right, although we do have some continued work and goals to meet, we also have some areas that I'd like to positively acknowledge and highlight among our schools. So there are quite a few remaining slides here that include some of these. I'm not going to go through all of them, so you can feel free to peruse those at your leisure, but I'll just share a few of them. So we do have schools that fell within the significantly exceeded expectations ranges, which included Banting Elementary, Meadowbrook, Rose Glen, and Engineering Prep. So South High School's overall rating increased by 4.50 points and now meets expectations. Les Paul in the area of ELA saw more students perform in the proficient and advanced area than in 21-22. In the area of ELA, all student combined and in subgroups grew above the average. So these are great celebrations, especially looking at that growth. Bethesda's achievement was at the 74.1st percentile. In mathematics achievement was significantly above other K-5 schools in the state. Lowell saw all students in the area of ELA combined grow above average at 4.2, and Butler in the area of ELA saw more students perform in the proficient and advanced categories than in 21-22. So again, a lot of celebrations. So as I mentioned, there are quite a few slides here that go over some additional individual schools' achievement that you can review. So like Jen mentioned, we continue to review, analyze, and triangulate and use all of our data sources to improve our efforts as part of our continuous improvement in Waukesha School District. So I'm going to just briefly share some of the examples of how and when we do this. So during our last all administrator time together, we spent time reviewing and analyzing our report card data, especially focusing on the areas of achievement and growth. Similar to how we've looked at our data tonight, administrators took a deeper dive into their data, noticing any trends that they saw, and had any initial conversations about potential why for the way the data is. As part of our next steps, we will continue to review this data and explore strategies for increasing our achievement and growth. Additionally, work has been done in the past year or so working on strategies and practices, which are noted here in this slide. A few of those being schools have reviewed the target group outcomes to ensure students receive additional supports in addition to using our multi-tiered system of supports to help students. SAIL goals and actions for improvement are adjusted as part of that continuous improvement process. And there was a focus on elementary writing, gradual release of responsibility, focused instruction, collaborative learning, independent practice. We've talked about the movement towards block scheduling at the high school. In 22-23, the use of IXL as a resource was explored. The language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling training was discussed. And then strong professional learning communities from our staff continues to be an area of development. All right, so following tonight's presentation of the report card data, our district's KPI website will be updated. And as can be seen from the KPI reporting out timeline, our next reporting out will be in February, and that will include the high school GPA, which is goal number 3. Thank you for your time tonight. Are there any questions or comments?
I think there might be a few. Does anyone want to start? Mr. Browski?
It's a lot to take in, obviously. Just a minor question back to the growth area. There was comparison among similar students. What's the definition of similar students? What goes into that?
Yeah, so it's looking at students who scored similar to that student, and then looking to see like their growth as much. So that graphic that I showed shows you where that student scored, and then where the average group of students scored on the next year's test. So it looks to see, is that growth similar to, or is it less than another group of that growth?
When the peers start at a very close range on that initial assessment. So if Dr. Siebert and I scored similarly, our growth could be compared. But if you scored really different than I did, then we probably wouldn't be compared
I see.
to growth over time.
And is that within a certain couple percentage points, or do you know how close it's got to be be considered similar?
That is a very good question. I am not familiar on that, what that number
All right,
is, or
I was just curious.
CPI has released that.
I don't think they've released that.
Yeah.
And different systems use a different calibration of how big or wide that range is.
Anyone else? Mrs. Kozlowski?
You did a really fantastic job. It is very, very hard to pull together this type of analysis and talk numbers and do comparisons on that. So I appreciate your time, your how you walk through that. And I'm going to do my annual commentary. So I spent some time looking at the data, downloading it and piecing it, and recognizing that the pieces that make up a school report card, you've got in some schools 25% plus of a weighting on the bottom 25% of achievement. Okay, so and then we also take a look at growth. So for me, the two biggest things that I care about are growth and proficient. So within all of the data, and I'm taking a look at, I have it broken out by high, middle, and elementary. We are still sitting somewhere between 58 to 62% not proficient in math or English. That, the shining piece, and Jen, this may be something to talk about as we look at KPIs. Looking at a report card that tells me that I'm meeting expectations or exceeding is a false sense of happy when we still have so many students, and the graduation rate scares me because we are releasing students out into the world that are still not proficient. On the grand side, there's so much good that we are doing in this district. Okay, when I look at the growth and I look at the curriculum and I look at the student and the staff engagement on what this is going to mean, and specifically when I take a look at the elementary level where it matters, especially at the 3rd grade, and rolling that in and looking at the scores of where we have proficiency in elementary and watching proficiency as it moves into middle school, there's a drop. And that is something else that we should be talking about, is that the efforts that we are doing in the curriculum and all of the positive stuff we talked about even earlier with elementary social studies. I think that the focus needs to be a little bit more on internally the growth that we are seeing as a district and the proficiency as a district. I think I mentioned this in the last report card that we talked about. Looking at a state average where you've got Milwaukee that significantly skews what the state average looks like, Waukesha is so much better. We have such a talent of staff, and we have eager, hungry children that are ready to learn. So that is my annual presentation of how I feel about the school report cards, because I just think it gives a very false sense of really what is happening, and I don't want to lose sight of we're really doing a lot of really great things, and we're growing and we're seeing those results. I just think there's a different way for us to measure internally how are we doing versus looking at this.
Yeah, I would just second that. I mean, I agree with you, looking at the growth and looking at our proficiency. I think drilling down and looking at that information versus like an overall score is really going to help us to target our efforts more specifically. Agree.
You did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Koenig?
And I'll bring back what I said earlier with the social studies. I know that last year we implemented a new elementary literacy curriculum. I know this past spring we approved a new math curriculum that was just implemented this September, along with a new middle school curriculum, ELA curriculum. Again, looking at this year's achievement that has half a year of a new curriculum, I'm going to be very curious to see this coming spring's results, more so in literacy, because now you'll have about 2 years, and you'll have, those kids would have had 2 years now of this new curriculum and the rigor of the new curriculum, and they'll have almost a full year of the math at the elementary level. So I'm really, excited to see some of that reflected in this data, and I think it will be. Again, same as social studies, just it's new, but I think it's going to make a difference.
So it's hard for me to take a victory lap on our KPI because it's just not good enough. So, okay, check the box, right? It's there out of necessity because we have to set the minimum expectation, and we should celebrate it for a couple seconds, right? And we should certainly celebrate the fact that the administration, the staff, the families at South have really elevated academically what's happening there. North saw a really significant improvement. And so there's really good things happening, and people are working hard. Those 5 points are hard to get. So I would just like to recommend that we as a committee at our next meeting talk about what KPI is going to replace that KPI. I have some thoughts. And I think Jen mentioned that, we're kind of close on the district meeting expectations to that next level. There's a few things that are consistently kind of in focus for me, and that is what we're going to talk more about tonight too, which is just kind of what's going on in our middle schools. And I think it's very interesting because I talk to families and I talk to our high school principals, and I kind of understand a little bit about where kids are moving from one middle school to another and where they're coming from elementary schools. We have elementary schools that are significantly exceeding expectations. We have high schools that are exceeding expectations. It's the same students. So there's a pass-through in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And we need to understand that. And I actually think that, I think our principals are talking about that. And I think there are things that we can do to make sense out of what's happening in the middle there. I did appreciate that what one of the parents said about, it's just a difficult time for everybody. So I think that has to be our area of focus. And I also think, so in 2021, I think everybody understands or remembers that the formula changed, and so did the ranges of the different categories. And so it's really difficult now I think there was an attempt to just build some fairness and some credit for growth in some other areas. But it's very difficult to have apples to apples comparisons because what one score means in one district is maybe a little bit different than what it means in another district. And yet that doesn't excuse low scores because I've said this before, and I said this before I was on the board, like it or not, these are the things that people are going to measure us on. And so we need to be able to understand it and explain it. So that plus or minus 2 or 3 points, I think sometimes is really hard for us to get a grip on. But I think collectively, if we understand what moves the needle 2 or 3 points in all schools, that's something that's going to show up at the end of the day for the district. And so, I would like to kind of think about what that next KPI is in terms of what movement has to happen for us as a district to be where I think we need to be. Which is meeting expectations and factoring in the fact that we have very diverse student population and we should celebrate their growth. And we'll be able to because that's how these report cards are designed. So I'm excited about that. And then I think, there are those schools that just consistently are exceeding expectations. And we know, again, with this formula, that's not just about achievement. And so kids are getting what they need. And I think that's just a positive we should continue to celebrate. I think Mrs. Kozlowski kind of pointed out, collectively, I would say statewide, maybe even nationally, none of us should be satisfied with large percentage of students not being at grade level, not being proficient at grade level, and yet the graduation rates that we're seeing statewide, right? So we really need to understand that. And I actually think there's a lot of the curriculum that's happening at the elementary level that's going to impact that. And I think some of the new expectations around literacy and around checking in at the right grade levels with our kiddos and families is going to be a game changer for everybody. So it's good to see that there aren't any big bad surprises. But I think collectively, I feel like, our goal should be to aim higher. But I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that you all put into the data and helping us, kind of summarize what's there, because it's good to see. Any other questions? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next topic on the agenda is the approval of the Education for Employment Plan.
Yeah, so 2 familiar faces are coming on up as they get situated. I do want to share that today what they'll be talking about is an Education for Employment Plan. We do have a KPI around this, and so they'll speak to that. The reason it's not under the KPI only section is because the plan does need to be approved. So last year we really focused on reporting out the KPIs, really just teaching and learning, but we're trying to bring them all at appropriate times and just be really clear about which ones we're reporting out on. So you'll hear about that tonight.
Good evening. I'm just going to introduce my colleague here, Molly Hoppenschild, and she is our CTE, Careers and Technical Education Coordinator, and she will be presenting on the 2 things that Ms. Gunnerman just mentioned, an Education for Employment annual update for approval, and she will also be reporting out on one of our KPIs on student engagement.
Thank you. It's been a year. I think it's on. Yeah? Okay. Since I've been here, and I have some lovely data to share with you all, and I'm always excited to share it with you. So first off, the Education for Employment Plan was sent out to you prior to the meeting for your review. It contained all of the required sections based on PI 26, the state statute. So it has some information about each of those items. I'm not going to read it all to you, but I would love to bring out some highlights. So I'm going to just share some key pieces that I think are important for our district just to take a look at and celebrate. One is that 89% of our juniors and seniors take at least one CTE class as part of that school year. And 70% of our seniors are considered what is a CTE concentrator, meaning they've taken 2 or more classes in a specific program of study that is typically going to be an area of focus for their future career path. So what that means is students are starting to see a correlation between the courses that they take in high school and how they can test out that pathway for future moving forward. So it's great to see, always a positive. We tend to stay right around that 70% mark annually, so that's a positive. The next piece is about Youth Apprentice. Our work-based learning program at our high schools has grown significantly. In the 22-23 school year, we had 171 students participate in that work-based learning. That's a partnership with the Department of Workforce Development, and there are very specific pathways that the students are engaged in that work-based learning in. I anticipate that number being around the same, if not a little higher. We added a few new pathways, including education being one, so that's exciting to have on the books. And then another piece is that we do have a large amount of transcripted credit classes, the largest in Waukesha County in terms of the number of courses that we offer for college credit within our own schools. And our success rate is sitting around 80%. And again, that's pretty much status quo. Later, I'll share a little bit more about that. We had 33 students earn technical diplomas as part of their high school career last year, most of which were in the Certified Nursing Assistant program. 6 of our regional career pathways are recognized by the DPI, and what that means is it has a very specific criteria to be considered a regional career pathway. It has criteria on the number of courses in a sequence, college level classes, work-based learning, a CTSO or club, and then some sort of certification. It doesn't need all of those elements, but it needs a certain number. So we have as many as they are, we have all of them at this point. So we keep working on them. We just added education as a regional career pathway. Both of our Project Lead the Way sites at both academies received Sites of Distinction yet again, and that is looking at our student data, enrollment, pass percentage on the PLTW exam, and how we meet student success. Some of our partnerships, again, we like to feature that we do work very closely with the Business Alliance and Waukesha County Technical College for a lot of our programming. We partner with the Business Alliance for our Schools to Skills on manufacturing field trips at all of our middle and high schools to help showcase some of the area companies that we do work with. And then WCTC is obviously a huge partner. Thankfully, we're right next door to them in so many ways. We have a large number of transcripted credit, dual enrollment, Start College Now programs that I'll share some more data on further. So those are just some of our partners that we like to highlight. As well as our MAID partnerships, we've seen some growth. We started the MAID partnership about 10 years ago, and it started with 6 companies that come to the table monthly to meet with us and the teachers in the tech ed type areas. And they really focus on helping us change the mentality of what it looks like to take on a career in that path. They also help fund some of our programming. They take on our students as employees. And we've added Genrec, ThermTech, and Braley Gear in the last year. So we keep looking for new partners and reaching out to them. And then what we have on the horizon, we thought we were going to have them already, refreshed state standards. They are in draft, hopefully being approved for both business and marketing, health science, and then family and consumer science. Tech ed was delayed 1 entire year, so we won't see that until probably the following school year. So once we get those, we'll start taking a look at our courses and refreshing them as needed. Another portion of the Education for Employment Plan is just an update on the academic and career planning. As part of the state statute, again, grades 6 through 12 have specific programming around how to plan for career success. So the district team meets annually to assess the progress. We look at the lessons, we look at completion, we look at anything else that's needed and make adjustments to that scope and sequence. So each grade level has a series of lessons that they complete through an advisory or homeroom type part of their schedule. We also use Methodize, the ACT prep program, in grades 9 through 11 as part of our advisory. We don't use the entire catalog that's provided by Methodize. We picked specific lessons at each grade level, but the teachers have access to all of them as well as the students to help them prepare for the ACT. We're starting to see academic and career planning, specifically Zello, being used. Zello, sorry, I should say what that is, right? Zello is the program that we use online to have them take career surveys and interest surveys and assess what they're doing, what they like, what they don't like, to help them find a best career fit. Those are used in junior conferencing now. We start seeing students completing their resumes through there. They get their transcripts through it. So it's a pretty robust program provided by the state that the students have started using in 6th grade and use all the way through graduation. And then because we want to make sure that the families have access to what we're doing in academic and career planning, annually we update the website to make sure that, number one, the Ed for Employment plan is there, but also the outcomes for academic and career planning by grade level. So there's a nice summary for each family member to look at if needed. So that being said, the Education for Employment Plan was a document provided for you. It requires all the state information needed by the state statute, and at this point, we'd be looking for approval for that plan.
Any questions? I'll start, unless somebody has something. Okay. But do you have a question? I do. You should go first. Go ahead.
I think mine is much more of a statement, but this excites me.
It excites me too, so thank you.
The prepping and seeing, I have 2 daughters that went through the CNA courses, right, and understanding, I know that's a really big piece to this, but the impact that this has at the age that we're getting them excited and focused about what their future is, even if it's unknown and we don't know the necessary career path. I enjoyed reading this. I enjoyed seeing all of the opportunities. I think we talked about this, I don't know if it was last year or at a different session, is how are we making sure that people are aware of all of these opportunities that we share with the Business Alliance, WCTC, to really partner. I mean, we've got students who, are doing college credits elsewhere and doing it gives me a lot of great pleasure to see this. So obviously, the annual approval is great, but just hearing about all of the things that we're doing and offering is really great.
Mr. Zenobia?
Very general question I have, but what sense do we have of students that are coming out of the district that are being placed not only in the colleges, but in local businesses that maybe aren't taking that pathway? Just a general sense. I always ask numbers that people don't have in front of them, because how would you know what I'm going to ask, right? So, but I know there's a lot of partners in this, and there's a ton of great companies that we're working with. There's a ton of great companies in Waukesha and in the area that are in a way investing in us, and I hope that these advantages and opportunities are being taken advantage of. So any sense of how these programs are actually getting our students to where they want to be, or can begin?
Anecdotally, I'd say that we hear stories of students that are ruling out programs as a result. Like, nope, that's not for me. Great. We want you to do that now before you're on a very expensive timeline. We also hear students, that start in a work-based learning program with an employer. I give an example. Last year, we have a student at Braley Gear. He's still working there, but he's attending school on their dime.
Excellent.
Those are the stories we want to hear. I couldn't speak to how many students go right into the workforce and stay there. What we're seeing is just that they become very loyal to the work-based learning partners that they're with. And I'll speak that they believe in the community so much that these businesses are, if you stay with us, great. If not, we're still helping Waukesha, the county in general, economically. So it's a win-win for everyone involved. But that's not data. We probably could speak to how many students are going on to a post-secondary based on National Clearinghouse data.
Yeah, I was going to similarly say, anecdotally, just being at a high school, as an administrator at a high school, I will tell you that there's, at least a handful of students every year who, as they're graduating, they're telling me about the job that they have, or they're staying in their job and probably making close to what, I made my first year as a teacher, right? And they're 18, and so there are always, and those were the students that we were worried about when they were freshmen, and then they got into these programs and they really excelled, but anecdotally as well.
Very good. Thank you.
Well, we're really good at this. This is a gem for us. And Molly, your passion has just come through in all of this as well. Left the North Open House earlier tonight, and Mr. Shalmo was presenting to students just about how North, I think, maybe is the biggest user of dual enrollment services within southeastern Wisconsin.
Yes.
Which is unbelievable. And so one of the things that I think you mentioned junior conferences and some other things. As a parent, I think I now have kind of experienced that junior conferences sometimes feels like it's too late. By the time the student gets to junior year, they've already made some course decisions and they're set on a path that it's very difficult to kind of unravel. And I think that we need to consider how we get this information to students prior to that point in time. And frankly, I think, and I know there's some work being done in middle school even, but it has to start there. And then I think we need to check in with them after freshman, sophomore year more consistently. I know that there's limited capacity in how much our guidance counselors can do one-on-one with students, but it's been my experience, not only with our personal experience, but with other families in the district, that it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know how all of this was available. The bottom line, and the literal bottom line, is $320,000 in tuition savings passed on to students because we have the ability for them to take these classes. When Mrs. Landish was here, we talked a little bit about the fact that maybe it's a better kept secret because there's a cost associated with this, but it's an important cost, right? If we can help students begin their career journey, whether that be, college or trades or whatever that's going to be, it's just really exciting to see that this is working. So I would just like to see a little bit more movement around this earlier so that students maybe don't get stuck in that, first couple years of high school and then, and you don't fully appreciate how important those course and elective decisions are in freshman and sophomore year. So strength and conditioning is always very exciting, but what if you could actually, get some college credits? So.
Just to add, one of the things that Molly and I did at the very beginning of this year is exactly what you're talking about. Like, we mapped out, when is this being introduced to students in 8th grade? When are the counselors presenting it in 9th grade? When in their advisory in the homeroom? And so we do have a document that maps it out every grade level and all of the different times. So we do have several different times each year that this is being communicated. One of our discussions is just because we're presenting it doesn't necessarily mean that students are retaining it or taking it home, or right?
Telling their parents.
Telling their parents, right? And so like nights like the open houses last night at West and tonight at North, like that should be one of the places that it is being discussed as well. And then Molly and I presented at a counselor meeting. All of the high school counselors were there and the middle school counselors were there. So we will continue working on that and making sure that's robust.
We've identified with the Business Alliance, there's been some work around pivot points, what we call pivot points in this student's educational path, 8th grade being one, 10th grade being one, because 11th grade is typically too past. But unfortunately, our freshman schedule, electives are like the last thing that they worry about freshman year. You might get one, you might get two. So 11th grade, it tends to be where they can open up and really start to explore. But I do agree, earlier the better.
I think even just to have that thought process of when I get there, I have these options available to me, because that impacts, some of those subtle decisions, even sophomore year, that will affect that. By the way, Zello has been a lot of fun in our house, and apparently I picked the wrong career, so thank you for that.
It's always fun to redo that every so often, just to see what your next journey might be.
It is pretty fun. Yeah, it is fun. Any other questions about the plan or about the success so far? All right, so I know the team is seeking an approval for that plan, so I'd be looking for a motion to approve.
I would move to approve the Education for Employment Plan as presented.
Thank you. Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, all right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you.
All right. just a little bit more information then for you related to a KPI. It's KPI Goal 2 under student engagement. And that is to see continued growth in students participating in industry credentials and dual credit enrollment. And the reason for that being that there's a significantly more likelihood of persistence in further education based on that information. So the first one is industry certifications. This shows you our growth over time. The blue line represents the number of students. The red line represents the number of certifications. We had a very strong uptick in certifications based on just our awareness of them and the ability to bring them in. So we've added quite a few in the last 5 years. We haven't added any new, but we've expanded on some to allow that to happen more easily. So last year, in the 22-23 school year, we had 191 students earn 238 certifications, some of which students earned 3 or more. So that's an amazing thing to see. Right? Right. Any questions on that one? Okay. Yeah, go for it.
So if they're getting multiple certifications, what are they getting?
So I'm going to give an example from the Engineering Academy. We have a student that took the Automotive Service Excellence. They may have taken the Autodesk Inventor certification and something else. There's a Carpenter Union one. So it just depends on that student. But we'll have a CNA student that also completes the Youth Apprentice in Health Science, so that counts as 2.
Got it, okay.
Tends to be somewhat interrelated, but not necessarily.
Strong achievers.
Yes, yes. And just on the same note, it's not even in my slides, but Microsoft Office user is one of them. And right now, West High School, it was in the social media, but they are the state leader in Microsoft Word right now, which is pretty darn cool. So they may win the championship in that. We'll see. We'll have to wait. The second one is about dual enrollment academy. So dual credit can really be broken down into multiple pieces, so I'll report on them separately. As Dr. Passaic indicated, North is the front runner. It almost could be called Waukesha North Dual Enrollment Academy, but we'll call it Waukesha School District's Dual Enrollment Academy. So you see that there's a huge increase in this last couple of years. Last year, we had 41 students successfully complete, and right now we're sitting at 75 students in Dual Enrollment Academy for Waukesha. So that's a really awesome program. Students attend WCTC 5 days a week, half the day, in a very specific program of study. And the next one then is about transcripted credit. This is my favorite topic, and as we look at courses in CTE, if we're bringing in a new course, we always try and get it transcribed with our technical college if possible. And that allows our students to earn college credit in our schools, no barriers, no cost. It is a tuition savings, and there's no, they don't have to go to and from a school. They can just do it right in-house. So last year, we had 704 students complete. This year, we are sitting at 789, but that's in progress, so it's hard to say where we're going to be at the end of the year. And that's just based on enrollment. So great numbers. Students are taking advantage of that. And the last part of dual credit is our Start College Now and Early College Credit Program. So Start College Now is the technical college program where students can take courses at WCTC, and then the early college credit is either UW system or private colleges. And you can see on here, Start College Now is the lighter blue line, and then the other two are split up between UW and private. But if we added that all up, last year we had 97 students complete a course in Start College Now with our technical college program, and in early college credit, we had 70 students complete courses. And then AP numbers, this is reported out by a bunch of different groups, so I don't really need to spend a lot of time on it, but it is considered dual credit in the sense of state reporting. So on our state report card, it is one of the data points that's pulled. In the 22-23 school year, we had 1,513 students take an AP course, and this year, right now, in progress, it's 1,644. So in summary, our students are accessing college-level classes, industry credentials, and a growing rate. I think in large part, I give kudos to our school counselors because they really are helping communicate this to the families as often as possible. And it's, like you said, it's a gem of Waukesha. I'm really proud to be able to share this information with you all.
Any questions about the KPIs? Thank you for all of the updates and the data. I would say, one thing I know when we put the KPIs together around just engagement and the dual enrollment, dual credit and the various different programs, we wanted to see that continued growth because that just demonstrates that students are engaging in things that are going to kind of permeate beyond high school diploma. I'm not sure that more is always necessarily the right goal. But it does certainly reflect that the programs are attractive. And so I think that's a positive sign. But there too, we might want to consider, like for example, enrollment in AP courses is important and exposes the students to college rigor. But then there's the test, and then there's the credit that actually transfers. And so that might be something that is of value. Similar with some of the technical courses, the dual enrollments, I think the certifications are really important because those are actually adding value, those resume line items and things like that. So we may just want to look at that as well and think about how we could tweak it, understanding that more reflects interest and some success with the programs, but it might not always be the only measurement. So, thank you. Anything else? All right. Thank you both.
Have a great night. No, I can carry it. Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda is a discussion on middle school personalized learning programs.
Oh my gosh, why can't I disconnect?
Molly, should we just wheel you away?
A week ago, yes. Today, I'm okay. Yes, I have a knee brace.
We have our middle school administrators joining us at the table.
All right, well, Jen's going to pull up the presentation. You can see we have our presenting team here at the table. And we'll just start out, I'll kick it off before I turn it over to Jen. And the first slide that we have talks about the mission of the School District of Waukesha. And we all know what that mission is. And I think collectively, as a board and an administration, we've focused on moving from a system of schools to a school system. And you heard terms tonight such as scope and sequence, guaranteed experiences, universal curricular resources. Those are all terms that speak to that work. That's important because it allows us to have common and consistent expectations in a district of this size, which is the 7th largest in Wisconsin. And it also allows for us, by working together within parameters across levels and across the system, to have consistent expectations for enhancing student results, which we've also talked about this evening. So tonight, we have our principals and Dee here to talk about the middle school personalized learning programs, which are Compass at Les Paul, Flight at Horning, and Quest at Butler. So before we turn it over to them, I'll turn it over to Ms. Gennerman, and we'll go from there.
We wanted just to take a moment to share some of the work that, with this board support that has been done in the area of teaching and learning. What I'm referencing here, and you could click on it, but many of you were here during the live presentation of the 22-23 school year in review. This is something that Ms. Landis shared last year. And I just want to start by just circling back and sharing with others some of the work that was done last year in the area of teaching and learning. Not only was substantial financial support given to additional curriculum from the district, we also used our ESSER funding to really increase the work that we were doing for teaching and learning. Like Molly shared tonight, last year we had increase of dual enrollment with WCTC. We increased funding for gifted and talented last year. And in the process of all that financial support and board support and administrative and teacher collaboration, we had 11 core content area curriculum resources updated. And so as Ms. Koenig had talked about, it's always learning, when you have a new resource and curriculum, but in the end, oftentimes it's, more rigorous and updated with the standards. 3 of those 11 core content area resources are specifically for the middle school. So this year, that's what people are implementing throughout the middle schools. That was just adopted last year.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to bring you through the points that are seen on the left-hand side of the screen tonight, just to define some of the terms that we're going to be talking through so that we have a common understanding about what it is that we mean when we're referring to these concepts. The first I'd like to begin with is the concept of a guaranteed and viable curriculum. A guaranteed and viable curriculum means high-quality instruction with approved resources and common assessment. It means a K or pre-K through 12 scope and sequence that builds upon one another. And it includes a curriculum that actually gets delivered with an assurance of systems that eliminate any barriers to its actual delivery. I'd like to also integrate the opportunity to learn about inquiry-based learning. You'll hear about this a little bit later in the presentation. Inquiry-based learning is the foundation upon which most of our curricular resources lie. They start out with essential and/or compelling questions that students aim to answer by building background knowledge and skills. And they do this through whole group instruction, small group instruction, collaborative learning, and independent learning opportunities. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about differentiation within a guaranteed and viable curricular experience. Differentiation includes supports to access and supports to learning within a resource, supports to communicate proficiency in learning. It's based upon a common scope and sequence that is shared across a system. It is differentiation that includes the increase and/or decrease of text complexity, allowing students to access their learning and/or extend their learning within, before, and beyond their grade level. It does not replace specialized instruction, nor does it replace services for English learners or services for students who are identified as gifted and talented. Specialized instruction, as well as English learning and gifted and talented service, includes specific and personal goals that are set with students and which students are supported to meet within a guaranteed and viable curriculum sequence. Personalized learning is something that we talk a lot about. I don't know that we have a common understanding about how that's defined, and this is really important. Personalized learning, as defined by the Institute for Personalized Learning, includes 4 attributes which are absolutely essential. The first is that it is a competency-based learning experience. Competency-based learning includes students being able to move up and down a continuum to both support their learning before the grade level, within the grade level, and beyond the grade level, as we talked about in the case of differentiation. It also includes customized learning paths. The customization includes, and I will later define this, students being able to determine what they learn, when they learn it, how they learn it, and how they evaluate and/or show their learning, completely designed and/or co-designed by the individual student themselves. It also includes the utilization of a learner profile. A learner profile is a set of data, preferences, and a variety of other identifying information that a student would like to use to apply in their learning and in helping to support how they design their customized learning path. And then finally, learner agency. Learner agency really refers to the extent to which a student can own, monitor, and extend their own learning with decreased assistance and/or direction from an adult. These are foundational practices. Many of these practices have not been in place in our PLP programs as referred to this evening for many years. One of which includes the learner profile. This is an essential practice that guides the rest of it. that has not necessarily been supported by ongoing professional development over the last several years, at least 8 years. Customized learning paths are often units of study and/or curriculum that is designed by the student and/or by the teacher based upon student interests or teacher interests and passions. They may or may not be aligned and/or are loosely aligned to standards and/or complexity of text. All middle schools use competencies currently in the form of rubrics that are developed 6 through 12, as we are always intending to get students to aim not only for their grade level success criteria, but far beyond. So just to define what we mean by PL. Acceleration has always been a value in the school district of Waukesha, and it's not something that is limited to students that participate in a PL program. Acceleration is available to all students, and in particular, we find many acceleration opportunities through the area of literacy and social studies. But in particular, we have built structural pathways for students to accelerate in mathematics. So all learners, regardless of their membership in a PL program, have access to accelerated math pathways. In our 2023 adoption of middle school math curriculum, we did develop a scope and sequence for acceleration that begins with identifying students in the 5th grade for acceleration into a 6th grade 6-7 experience that would go into a 7th grade 7-8 experience and culminate in integrated math 1 at the high school high school level, but offered in the 8th grade. There would be a process in place for determining our 5th grade students that is initiating this spring as we go into course selection. At the present time, we have integrated math 1 offered across 6 sections at our middle school level, so it's quite successful. In addition to that, we do offer an opportunity for acceleration in science, whereby 8th grade students are offered the opportunity to take high school biology for a science elective credit. We wish to talk a little bit about the specific nature of transitioning from an elementary school. We have 11 elementary schools and we have 3 comprehensive middle schools. It is a time of anxiety. I'm a parent of a recent transitioned student. They're going from a very small community into a much larger community. They are posed to meet many new friends. They are going to have many new experiences, including learning languages, touching sharp metal objects, cooking and burning things. There's a variety of things that they do. They will have new courses and new teachers, and their worlds will be ever expanding. My colleagues here prepare diligently for this transition by providing students with opportunities to spend 2 summer half days getting to know the building, getting to know how to use the spaces in the building, getting to know some of the classmates that they'll be working with, how to navigate all of the spaces, and more importantly, how to execute their own behavior within the expectations of this new and wider opportunity to expand as an individual. 6th and 7th grade students at the middle school are placed into smaller cohorts of students as they gradually get older into the 8th grade schedule, in which they are experiencing perhaps 4 to 6 different transitions during a day. The 6th and 7th grade students have tighter house communities, house models, where they have their core instruction together with a small amount of teachers. And then their electives gradually expand their friendship group. And they begin to meet students throughout their grade level and then finally throughout all of the grade levels. This gradually increases independence for our students and prepares them for what we believe is a successful high school transition as they are leaving the 8th grade. Next. And so, I'm sorry, can you go previously? The educational recommendation at the time amongst this team is that we offer many of the experiences already within our school building to provide each and every student with opportunities to expand on their individual pathway, and in doing so are making a collective recommendation to phase out the 6th grade of personalized learning at the following sites. So we've heard tonight and also in previous evenings references to personalized learning and references to multi-age classrooms. They are not synonymous, they are different concepts, and we want to go through a little bit about how they are different. Personalized learning, as I mentioned from the Personalized Learning Institute at CISA, comprises these 4 aforementioned attributes. They are competency-based, they are customized by students designing their own learning. They use a learner profile to guide decision-making, and they really emphasize learner agency, as we do in all of our middle school classes. Some of these foundational practices have not been in practice for a very long time, one of them being learner profiles. When we started the programs 10 years ago in 2013, that was an essential and a foundational component that we'll talk a little bit more about throughout the presentation. So competency-based and customized learning pathways don't guarantee a guaranteed and viable curricular experience. The purpose actually of personalized learning is to tailor all learning to a student's interest and or pathway, including their passions, some of which you might find controversial. The K-12 scope and sequence and the standards alignment can't be guaranteed. They're simply referential in a personalized learning environment, and that is by design of the environment. Sometimes you can do grade level clustering in a personalized learning environment. Sometimes you can use multi-age. Those two things can exist together. But all personalized learning environments do feature whole group learning, small group learning, collaborative learning, and independent learning. Personalized learning is not a space, it is an approach. Heavy emphasis on co-design and student choice in how they learn, what they learn, when they learn it, and how they demonstrate what they've learned. Whereas a multi-age classroom is distinct. A multi-age classroom can refer to having students of multiple ages and or multiple grades clustered. Some of the ways that we have done this have included using the same curriculum for multiple age students, or using grade level curriculum amongst different groups of students, or using some sort of competency-based structure. For efficiency, one of our schools has chosen to use an ABC curriculum, which effectively this year has included both 6th and 7th grade students receiving a 6th grade standards-based curriculum. So there are some issues with that that we'll talk about in the future, just in a few moments. Something that's very common at the elementary school but very unpopular are splits. A split where half the class is in 2nd grade, half the class is in 3rd grade, and the teacher needs to figure out how to approach instruction in an environment like that that ensures that every single student moves forward in the standards that they're learning. So that would be multi-age and personalization in context. I'd like to ask my colleague Jeffrey Tagey to join the conversation, as he was the initiator of the Flight Academy in 2013 at Horning Middle School. And so he will take us through to 2016, and I'll pick it up again.
So we wanted to provide some historical context to personalized learning in our district as it's evolved over the last 10 plus years. The Flight Academy was the first official recognition of a personalized learning program in our school district in the 2013-2014 school year. However, prior to the Flight Academy actually taking place, the co-teacher, Krista Crowder, and I, who co-founded the program, actually spent an entire year in development of what that program would look like, how it functioned, professional development, mapping out allocation of resources, all of those things. So in addition to full-time teaching within the school district, we also spent that year planning what that program would look like and how it would actually play out for the school district, including how we might be able to continue to expand it. As we rolled out the Flight Academy that first year, other middle schools began to gain interest in the opportunity to offer a different style of learning. One of the things that we focused on and we made sure that we promoted is that personalized learning was not necessarily better than our legacy or our traditional model. It was just a different offering and opportunity to engage students in a different way. Another important thing to note is when we first started these programs, there was no one-to-one iPad rollout for all of our schools. There was also not what I would call any sort of innovative or updated spaces. All three of our middle schools were still using resources and furniture and spaces from back when they were originally designed. So the integration of these programs really was a catalyst on how we might use technology innovatively, as well as spaces and resources in an innovative way. So that led us to the expansion of the Quest program starting at Butler Middle School. Again, a similar format. However, I can share with you that each program took their own perspective on personalized learning. Again, the teachers who initiated that program went through professional development and training on launching that program and making sure that it was being implemented in alignment with the honeycomb model through the Institute for the Personalized Learning. That then led way to the inclusion of Compass at our third and final middle school, so that we made sure that we had an offering at all three programs, as well as an extension at North High School. We now were at the position in our district where we were having students who were graduating from our personalized learning programs, and there wasn't really a high school offering. Again, this entire time, we're still rolling out technology as part of our one-to-one rollout, because that was not a everybody gets it all at once. It was rolled out slowly across the schools. So we worked with the high school again with staff to make sure that staff had training in the honeycomb model. They understood the concept of personalized learning and what that meant and how we're continuing to support students. That was also a time that we began to implement personalized learning practices in our dual language program at Horning Middle School, the Habitat. With all of the expansion of our personalized learning programs, there was a recognition from the district that we needed some unity and some unification and some oversight in making sure that the programs were adhering to the honeycomb model and that staff were trained appropriately and, again, implementing that with fidelity. So the district created a personalized learning coordinator position. I served in that position for a year. So I oversaw the implementation and the oversight of all of the programs across all three schools. I can tell you in that year we spent a significant amount of time norming and calibrating around what personalized learning is, how we're implementing it, its core foundational practices, and then norming around how teachers are managing, delivering a curriculum that is competency-based and tailored specifically to students. And then that led us to the dissolution of that position later that year.
So in 2016, unfortunately, the position, as well as many others, could no longer be supported. That was precisely at the moment that Mr. Ryan Patt over at West High School was developing an elective experience called TREC. TREC continues to run at West High School. It is a place where students can go to pursue passion projects, extended learning, and other, I would say, niche individual activities that are related to an extension of some of the content that they're learning in their regular classrooms and or from outside of the school. In fact, I met with the teacher last night and he shared a wonderful framework in which all students can access that learning experience. In the 2016 school year, again, the coordinator position faded away. In 2018, I made the very difficult decision, but strategic decision, to also change the operation of the dual language Habitat personalized learning program in favor of a full commitment to the School District of Waukesha comprehensive literacy model that we had been using for literacy at that time. In 2019, the North High School principal made the same decision to discontinue the North Inspire program at North High School. Then in 2018, we began to develop the curriculum design process that you are all very familiar with. We did this to address the impact of our SDW created curriculum on our students and the lack of achievement we were seeing amongst all of our student groups, including their languishing growth. And then the pandemic hit. Nearing the pandemic, our district had just completed a very important critical referendum. So as we were going through the pandemic, we begun construction on flexible learning environments and facilities at all of our schools, which included improvements in libraries, improvements in collaborative spaces for students, including collaborative spaces within the classrooms, which I hope you have gone out to see in the buildings and can really recognize impact. Starting in 2019 through 2023, the state of Wisconsin made significant shifts and updates to the Wisconsin state standards that really changed the way that we operate in the cycle of teaching, learning, and assessment with students. They are much more inquiry-based, and that has caused us to go through 11 curriculum adoptions, many of those you have been present for, and to attempt to get to the guaranteed and viable learning experience that can address the inconsistent academic growth and achievement amongst all of our learners. So for the last 10 years, we've been asking ourselves, what do we do with personalized learning? How do we support personalized learning? Where are we going? And we've seen different commitments around that. During this time, we've consistently asked questions about how to best support, how to best develop, and how to best make decisions that is inclusive of the students that are being served in those places. We have developed several possible solutions. Going out throughout this summer, we discussed some of those solutions and or concerns early this summer with the executive cabinet. We gathered and collected some data and some survey information from teachers around their experiences, brought that back in October of this year, and we're set forth to develop a recommendation, a communication plan, and additional touch points with our teachers, from which we did have a parent meeting, developed a Q&A document, and are here, of course, with you, the Board of Education. So some of the things that are leading us into the conversation around our student experiences are some of the policies that we consider as we begin to plan a well-designed curriculum and embedded processes for review, for revision, and for updating. The policies that guide our work include 2210, which requires an organized set of learning experiences, regular instruction in literacy, science, social studies, and math, and coordination of curriculum that meets state law. And within that policy, there is a specific requirement that I'm going to read verbatim, which includes innovative programs must implement consistent with board-approved curriculum. Next is 2220, which requires courses to be adopted and then approved with a guaranteed scope and sequence. 2510, which requires review and approval of all textbook and materials available and distributed to all learners. And then 2521, which requires selection of and a process to review all curriculum for continuous improvement. And that includes the development of the curriculum design process that we have used together as we have worked the last few years. A customized scope and sequence makes transition into and out of and into the high school very difficult for some students and does create gaps in a guaranteed viable curriculum environment, especially since students are coming through a continuum in elementary school and having an experience that doesn't necessarily have a pathway that is clear and transparent. There's somewhat of an unknown curriculum. There's not really a guarantee of what exactly is happening in each individual environment, and part of that is by design because learners are choosing what they want to learn. The one place and area where this is not the case is with the adoption of our Desmos math curriculum. Personalized learning environments as well as STEM, as well as all middle schools have adopted Desmos as the guaranteed and viable math curriculum. For language arts, we have a couple of things happening. In one of our schools, we are using an A year, B year, C year approach to using district curriculum in a multi-age environment. This means that this year, both 6th and 7th graders are receiving the 6th grade standards, text complexity, and resources for my perspectives. It would mean in future years, a 6th grader might be receiving the 8th grade curriculum, and an 8th grader might be receiving the 6th grade curriculum on an A year, B year, C year focus. It also means that there are some gaps if a student wants to come in or out of a program that is an A year, C year, B year. We've had students that have wanted to come in who will then be retaking their 6th grade year as a 7th grader. We've had kids that want to come out only to realize that they will have to retake and or miss an entire year of content. In other programs, we are using previously designed comprehensive literacy units, which this committee has already learned has been insufficient in creating the kind of student impact that we have wanted and was the basis upon which we did pilot and ultimately adopt the My Perspectives curriculum. One of the concerns we had with that former curriculum, as you might be aware, was that the complexity of the texts were not guaranteed and the rigor of the standard, as well as the gaps in language arts and writing instruction, were very tangible, and that was left for the teachers to curate and develop on their own. In the area of social studies and science, we have one PL program that is using the A year, B year, C year approach. Of course, there is pre-learning in a sequence that then is out of sequence in doing that. And then the others are based upon student interest, including interest which might not be reviewed and or revised, which could also include topics that may be controversial to some. We have found in the course of curating curriculum here in this district for the last 12 years that while teachers might have the expertise in engaging students, delivering instruction, differentiating, instructional design is a different set of expertise, and we can recognize after doing this now for many years, almost a decade, that the curated curriculum within the school district of Waukesha was difficult for a couple of reasons. If you didn't write it, it became very difficult for you to implement it, and the struggle to understand what the rigor of the standard is and interpret that into instructional activities and resources created a situation in which teachers were continually looking for resources out on the web or wherever they could find them. So to summarize, personalized learning in its core value of customization of curriculum is causing some of the inconsistencies here. The personalized learning profiles are not part of the experience as they are right now and yet had been formally guaranteed. We do know that learner agency is a value of all of us from pre-kinder through 12th grade. We want students using continuums consistently. We want students pushing not only to meet grade level standards, but to go beyond in that success criteria, and that is really, really critical. We achieve that in all of our middle school classrooms, that we share a value for whole group instruction, small group instruction, collaborative learning, and independent learning, as well as the advisory structure at the middle school that supports learners in developing the academic behaviors and proficiencies that they need to be successful in the school building and in their learning. I'd like to move the conversation a little bit over to my colleague Rob Bennett, principal of Les Paul Middle School, to talk a little bit about enrollment.
So over the course of the next several slides, you're going to see some things that have general enrollment and then breaking it down into some more specificity. In the enrollment summary, you're going to see some variability and inconsistency in enrollments from year to year, from building to building, and we're going to show what that looks like for you. Also then what the enrollment and staffing assignments may or may not look like due to some of that enrollment. Each building has different patterns. It's hard to track them on a trend line, so to speak, because they do vary from year to year and place to place. An increase in a building enrollment may not specifically speak to an increase in a program, and on the contrary, a decrease in enrollment may not be a decrease in the program, so you'll see some of those things. It also varies year to year, but going back, you'll see from 2019, 2020 to this current year and what our enrollment in the building and in the programs look like. In Les Paul, our enrollment has increased in our building, yet our enrollment in our program has decreased in the last few years. This also has shown that families may not be choosing a program, so to speak, for our school, and we can each speak specifically to our own buildings to some extent, but for our Les Paul, our building enrollment is increasing, yet our personalized programming enrollment is not matching that same trend. Over the course of the next slides, Kent and Laura will share some of the things specific to their building, and I will also share some as our building at Les Paul, and be able to give you some of those more specific details about who are the students in our programs.
Thanks, Rob. So here you can see some of Butler's numbers over the last 5 years, and we can see that there is some variables and inconsistencies when you're comparing enrollment in the Quest program as compared with enrollment in the entire school. So the circled items were things that jumped out at us. If you notice that the circled items indicate the grade level increased by 15 students from one year to the next, whereas the PL program enrollment did the opposite and actually declined 9 students, same cohort of students. While enrollment has been variable, we have seen a downward trend in enrollment over the past 5 years. When breaking out the numbers during the 1920 school year, we found that Quest made up about 15% of Butler's total population, and currently it is making up about 12% of Butler's total population.
All right, for at Horning, when you take a look at it, the total, start with just the building as a whole, has been a slow decline over time. We did lose a very large cohort of 8th graders last year. Otherwise, the other grade levels are looking pretty similar in terms of numbers for the building as a whole. In terms of the flight program, you can see there that there's quite a variability between anywhere between 35 and 64 students in it. the 1920 year had quite a few students, and so it's been pretty stable. Right now, we're at approximately 25% of our student population is in this program. As well as in terms of teaching staff, we do have some of the students that are in this program that are going out into with the gold, what we call the gold house at the 8th grade level, because they're using the same curriculum. So there is a teacher that is outside of the flight program that is providing math instruction as well.
At Les Paul, you'll notice too, 2019, 2020, as Laura had spoke about at her building at Butler, our Compass program comprised of about 10% of our building population, as to this year, which it is just about 5% of our building. You'll see that we do have a trend of decreased enrollment in our Compass program, yet we've increased our building enrollment the last 2 years. So to see those disparities. This is also led, as Kent has spoken to, about teachers who may be in our personalized program stepping out of that program to deliver instruction that they're highly capable to deliver in a math or science area.
So on this slide, we combined just to see some trends and patterns, because some parents had spoken about just differences and why their students or why they chose the PL programs. We see some pretty significant inconsistencies in distribution of students with IEPs in the PL programs. As you can see, where Les Paul, the numbers of students with IEPs enrolled has increased significantly over the past 3 years. You'll see the trend from 11% or so up to 21% in the current school year. Sorry, I just lost my spot here. Whereas Butler's trend has actually been the opposite of that. We started out with a higher percentage of students with IEPs, and now we're at the lowest that we've had with that, and Horning has remained relatively consistent. So all three buildings are just seeing some pretty significant inconsistencies. If you go to the next slide, we also wanted to break out students with 504s and how they spread out among the PL programs and among the building. Also very inconsistent across buildings and across years.
All right, so in this next slide, we have information on students of low socioeconomic status. So that is determined by those students who receive free and reduced lunch. So that really comes from some of the forms that are filled out, and there's some other ways that can be notified. That's a big thing that when you look at the state report card also goes into a big factor piece. With this, what you can kind of see is across the board, there's anywhere between triple to double versus what is all school versus within the PL program. I also want to note one thing is that when we pulled this data, we did the entire building as the average. We did not pull out students that are not in the PL program versus people that are students that are in the PL program. If we had done that, the gap would probably be much larger. So it kind of gives you an idea of who we're servicing right now in that program.
So we wanted to take some time to talk about some of the solutions that we as an administrative team had thrown around and taken a look at. So these are the solutions that we had considered and we shared at the parent meeting, with the exception of number 5, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But our team had to weigh each option with the policies that are listed here on this slide, as well as the student experience in and out of these programs. The SDW adopted curriculum, as designed and studied, cannot be implemented in a multi-age environment, and it's not fit for a customized learning experience. Applying the SDW curriculum makes the learning experience no different than any other classroom when we ask our personalized learning programs to do that. So when we ask our personalized learning programs to use our literacy or our math curriculum, for example, they're offering the same instruction as their counterparts who are in the legacy model. When personalized learning was rolled out, there was a significant investment from the district in resources, more specifically training and professional development around our staff, and making sure that they understood what personalized learning was and how it was to be implemented. And also we had more flexibility around the types of curriculums that we used, but again, there came a cost with that. Annually, we were spending over $30,000 for our personalized learning programs at their initiation. And so that continued to expand until it was started to be tapered back.
So we did consider the needs of the teachers and thought, well, what if we did a total relaunch and retrain of the teachers in the program? When we considered that, we did think to ourselves that the issue we are going to continually run up against is that any curriculum that we would provide in and of itself, because it wasn't customized by the student, would be inconsistent with and not a fit for personalized learning.
So bullet 4 is an interesting one. It's actually one that I'm rather excited about. And that was one piece that we talked about this summer was offering an elective course called Learning Center, I believe the name was, which would still be aligned with our guaranteed and viable learning, but it would also provide space at the middle school level for things like the passion projects, for deeper extended inquiry, for some exploratory challenge like Future Cities, so it could be built in there. We have some models for that, specifically with the Trek that you had heard about before, so taking that model and middle schoolizing it and bringing it in there.
We also considered having the program at one building, but that doesn't address the foundational curricular challenges as well as other transportation challenges that we would encounter if we put it all at one site.
One of the last things on the list, but not the last thing encountered, was working with Jim Murray at STEM for some support with his personalized pathways of STEM, which works separately under their charter status than from our teaching and learning policies. Jim was very willing and able to offer space and time for teachers to come together, yet it's two different systems under two different structures. To be able to do that and to allow him to have some time with our staff and to be able to have them access that. But like we said a little bit earlier too, some of our teachers were living in two worlds, the guaranteed and viable curriculum and personalized pathways. To be able to navigate both at the same time was very difficult. So really trying to keep in mind the capacity of all the amazing staff that are a part of these programs in our regular buildings to be able to give them the best options.
STEM leadership just simply doesn't have the constraints of a building-wide schedule of our policies around grading and reporting, and neither the systems of collaboration and support that we provide in our comprehensive middle schools. And so there were just some inconsistencies in being able to truly support those team members because they are working within two different governances.
So bringing it back together is that middle school level learning experience. We have spent extensive time, and our teachers, no matter where they are in our building, have done extensive work to provide students with a rigorous and guaranteed and viable curriculum. The curricular adoptions, the work that the teachers in our traditional pathways are working towards to deliver has done extensive work. We're engaging our learners and our teachers in inquiry-based teaching, which you heard earlier, which was monitored, measured, and celebrated for the things that were taking place. Each in their content areas, they're delivering whole group instruction, small group, collaborative, independent learning, and as a mid-level team, really providing that support and feedback to our teachers so that they can have the greatest impact for our students. This is something that we're working towards as a mid-level system, and from the celebrations earlier today, what is being seen in the social studies elementary curriculum and having that become a system-wide approach is really meeting the needs of our learners. It can be met with all of our learners.
And to build off that, we've been working really diligently to have consistent current experiences for our students across all sites. We're really proud of our advisory program that we implemented this year, which is a daily meeting of a smaller group of students. So it's approximately 20 students or so that meet regularly that allow for deep connections between staff and students. It kind of creates that little family atmosphere within the building. We have that focus in there as well, of that well-rounded experience for our kids. It's just a great opportunity that a lot of the parents spoke to is what they really loved about the PL program. We also have the house model at the middle school that we feel very strongly about, and it transitions our sixth graders into middle school by having that smaller cohort of students that travel among a smaller cohort of teachers. So it kind of shrinks the school for us, and it helps transition. So for example, sixth graders only move between two teachers for 3 hours of, or 6 actually hours of the day, so they have less teachers and less travel. And then as they transition to 7th grade, we add 2 more teachers into that core house model, so it starts to bridge that gap then from elementary to high school. And we feel that developmentally, it's very appropriate. And then in 8th grade, there's even a little more fluidity because you have things like the accelerated math pathway and the biology, which, create some new opportunities for students. But it's still, the house model is something we're very passionate about. The other piece with that is the house model provides us with a wonderful opportunity for professional learning communities to have common planning time on a daily basis. If they choose, we definitely meet weekly, but we're stronger together when we're able to have these meetings. So we can have house teacher meetings and can have core content teacher meetings where teacher teams can wrap around students for whatever the student needs are, but also for teachers to have time to look at data and plan for instruction to meet the needs of all learners. And it truly is something that we are really digging into this year and having deep and rich conversations about student needs and meeting those needs, but also really deep conversation on how can we instruct in a truly engaging and inquiry-based fashion.
Another significant shift that we've seen since the inception of our personalized learning programs has been an investment from our community and from this board in one-to-one technology, as well as our flexible learning environments through the referendum process. All of our middle schools have been updated to include spaces that allow for whole group instruction, small group instruction, collaborative learning, as well as the one-to-one technology has allowed for innovative practices to be expanded across our schools in all learning environments. Further investment from this board has been the adoption of a guaranteed and viable curriculum, which is designed for collaboration, discussion, and extended inquiry within all of our learning environments.
So there's a deep disconnect between the policy and the curriculum requirements for personalized learning. We meet students where they are. We accelerate learning growth in each and every classroom with expertly trained teachers who provide learning experiences for each and every kid that walks through our doors. We have a guaranteed and viable curriculum as the goal of this team and of this system. Instructional design that features whole group, small group, collaborative, and independent learning. All teachers are equipped with professional learning communities, like Laura had just mentioned, that support their instruction, learning, and impact to make great learning experiences in great schools. Due to these core reasons, it is my professional opinion, along with those of my colleagues to the side of me, principals, that we should phase out the PL programs in our buildings.
Thank you. All right, I suspect there are some questions. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we turn to the board? Okay, thank you all.
Thank you. That concludes our information.
Thank you. Mrs. Kozlowski.
Thank you. I will probably be somewhat winded, so bear with me. I want to start with where we came and how we got here, and I want to say that this presentation was light years ahead of what we shared with our parents last week. And I will say to you as a parent and somebody who sits on the board, I would be equally frustrated if I had the timing on where we were to understand where the value of where my child is going to be in a program that I believed was very successful and scary, and especially when the open enrollment and the school choice is such a narrow window. And I think the timing of that was just poor, right? And I don't want to say that necessarily on all of us. I'm greatly appreciative for the history and the timeline and the walkthrough, and I'm very grateful to hear your recommendation, because what I do know is that from principals and being closest to the students and the staff, these recommendations are hard. And when I take a look at walking through all of this, there was a lot of questions that I had, and I think that you've done a great job of presenting data and enrollment and thoughts and sharing with us. And these are hard decisions and not always in the best interest, but when I take a look at the timeline and the reasons that this was pushed through from the start of the creation of that, which was to meet every student where they're at and to offer things. And now I take a look at the evolution of the viable curriculum, and I take a look at the change in state standards that are pushed on us. I don't get so much into the policy on this, but I do look at the fact that there's been a tremendous amount of thought and dedication into looking at how are we going to continue to meet our students where they're at with, I think we've talked through this, I joke about the gradual release of learning or catch and release, and the large group and the small group and how we are dedicating those times. And you take a look at the cohorts and the houses and the onboarding. To me, when I start to take a look at this, there's almost a resemblance for me that these personalized learning programs, not for any fault of how this evolved, but have unfortunately to some degree left these students behind. That is my concern, is that have we and how do we, especially when I take a look at these ABC years when you've got different grade levels being taught to 3 separate grade levels in a different quorum and a different timeline. And if anybody is coming in or out of these, they most likely are missing it. They're missing something they're not, and none of us want to re-talk about report cards, so I do want to be respectful of that. But middle school is tough. It's tough just because it's middle school. But then layer in all of these other pieces that we're seeing, and when I start to take a look at achievement and proficiency and what we're doing, it's tough here. The numbers aren't aligning correctly. Some of the things that I heard, I think, are a lot of myths, right? That this personalized learning maybe at some point was an accelerated path to really help. We had questions about gifted and talented, and when I take a look at the 11 curriculums, 3 of them that are impacting middle school, these are designed to work with the student. They are designed to meet them where they're at, allow them to work at their pace, to achieve where they're at, move along on their path with the staff, the professional development that we're building in and doing on all of that. I think is really, really good as to the path that we're on, and we need to pull these kids within the rest of the program. Some of the other parents talked a lot about, we'll call it a school within a school, we'll call it the different bubble. I say it smells a little bit like a bit of a private school and a public school setting, and they're separated and out there. I think that there's a lot to be said when we talked about IEPs and the 504s and the parents that have really shed the value on how these programs shined for their students and led them. I think that's the one piece for me that I don't have an answer or comfort as to how do we continue to watch and monitor and support these students where we've seen them come in on an IEP and actually come off of it and they're thriving and they've got confidence and their anxiety is calmed. These are all things that you deal with every day. So I greatly appreciate the thought, the facts, the recommendation. Like I said, this was far more informational and helpful to understand where we've been, how you guys determined here, knowing that this is at the best interest of every single one of these students that is coming through these walls and how we can meet them where we're at. And I liked hearing about the transitioning, the growing, the transparent, and moving them and really helping them accelerate. I know specifically with math that we have put in, that is going to allow them. I was just able to watch, the Desmos last week. What an amazing curriculum. And I got to see the one of 2 sections of 8th graders in integrated 1 that are thriving. It's working. The pieces of how we've evolved from where we started this program to where we are, I think are moving in the right direction. And I think we just need to get everybody up on board. So thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Browski?
Yes. So it's a lot to take in. As far as I know, that was not in board docs before the meeting, so I'm assuming it's going to be there after, because I'm going to have to look at it a little more closely, some of the numbers and everything that you had there. Okay, a couple, comments and then questions. Maybe not in that order. Ms. Garcia, you had kind of run through quickly where the policy violations were, and I do have a copy of them here. I don't, at least for my benefit, could you quickly give me a paragraph or a number or a letter, just so I know specifically what you're referring to
Sure.
for each one of them?
Yep. I should know them by memory, but I do not. 2210.
Yep.
2220.
I've got each one, but
Okay.
you had referred to, I think, something in each one.
Oh, sure. Okay, 2210, focus on an organized set of learning experiences, regular instruction in literacy, science, social studies, and math. Is that
But-
what you'd like?
Is that like certain paragraphs? Just point me to it. We don't have to
Oh,
go over it
I
all.
have it in front of me to be
Okay.
able to show you. I know it's a longer document. You'll have
All
to
right.
probably go through it. I apologize, I didn't know that.
That's fine. So maybe we could do that offline, or you can email that to me. But I would like to look at that a little more specifically. Let's just see here. I'm trying to collect my thoughts. If we could just go back, I did appreciate the history. If you could just talk about what was the problem that PO was trying to solve to begin with? And is it, despite the difficulties with the program, is it still solving that problem?
I can speak to the inception of the program. We were looking to provide an opportunity for students to engage in technology and engage in curriculum and be a part of the design process with staff in terms of developing their understanding of content and curriculum. I will say that when we first started the program, we were operating off of a different set of rules and policies than what are currently in place in the district that weren't barriers at the inception and have come to light in recent years as policies have been changed and updated, specifically centered around curriculum.
I think growing out of a need to really address the achievement that we've all seen today, we've taken a more serious look at what it means to responsibly, I think, govern and oversee what we do for teaching and learning.
Okay. So would you say, despite the difficulties and maybe the policy violations, if you will, is it still solving the problem that it should be?
Well, no, all of our students have access to one-to-one technology and innovative spaces to be able to move, to collaborate, to engage in independent learning. Those were really sources of concern 10 years ago, for sure, because we didn't have those pieces in place.
Okay. You had mentioned these solutions that were considered, other solutions. What I have a hard time with is that when it was asked last week, Tuesday, nobody said anything. I mean, the silence was deafening when the parents were asking what was considered, and nobody had anything to say. So a week later, you gave us a list, which I appreciate. I guess I would ask, out of those ones that were considered, were any of them tried?
Last week, I did discuss the fact that we had purchased curriculum that was not a fit in these programs, and that we had considered and even offered curricular resources that just weren't a good fit, and where we did try to fit them in, we're in this ABC situation. We did talk also about the elective option last week. I'm not sure if everyone was able to be there, or who was able to be there, but talked about wanting to get an elective option up and going to be able to support some of the keystone experiences, which would include future cities and other opportunities to compete in project-based learning. And we did also talk about James Murray in particular. He is someone that is highly skilled, highly knowledgeable, and oversees a school-wide program that is quite unique. The one option that we did not discuss last week was offering it at one building, and precisely because it doesn't solve the other issues that we have. Offering it one building, you may offer it at 20 buildings. If you have to do the work to be able to offer it at that building, and I don't mean having to do the work, but surmounting some of the barriers and challenges that we have, it's not really a solution that we offer at this time. So I apologize if we weren't clear in those, but those are the points that I do remember sharing last week. How can I answer the next question about it?
Yeah, well, I guess what's difficult for me to understand or accept is, so earlier in the Student Services Committee meeting, they talked about the open enrollment survey. And the number one reason for open enrolling out of the district, one of the top two, I guess, number one reasons, if you will, if I'm putting it in the right context, was academics in other districts. And earlier we talked about, we're doing all these things with curriculum, trying to improve the curriculum, trying to make a lot of improvements in the district. And I realize some of those, haven't been a full year yet. But according to our current KPIs, we're still about, 58 to 62%. So time will tell on that. So it's a bit of an unfair, I guess, assessment at this point. I know the parents had asked if we had data of personalized learning students versus other students. I don't think we have that, and I think someone might have said it would be really impossible to get that, I think, if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but regardless, we didn't have the data. So all we have right now is we have students and parents, at least the ones we've heard from on emails and on public comments, that think very highly of the program and that are telling us that this is the reason that they've come to this district. So, other than hearing from other parents that maybe don't believe that or some data, I'm just having a real hard time with, we're trying to make improvements overall as a district, not seeing the improvement yet. Here we've got all these problems with the personalized learning, but everybody loves the program that we've heard from. I can't make sense of that, so if anybody else can, I would appreciate that.
Pointing at each other. I have a list of questions, but I'm going to wait till you guys are done. Ms. Koenig, did you have questions, or do you want me to start?
I don't even know where to start. I have so many things I'd like to say, but if you want to go ahead and anything you missed.
Yeah, I have a few questions that maybe might help the committee kind of get some context or trigger some other thoughts. I wanted to start with a question for Mr. Taggy. Were there achievement expectations in place when Flight was started? Was there discussion around, this is the achievement expectation of students that go through Flight and how we're going to measure it?
We did talk about metrics that we could use to measure. However, we determined that the metrics that would really be measuring the success of the program weren't necessarily things that we could quantify, like achievement. Really, the metrics that we were using or discussing using to measure the success of the program was really looking at student agency in developing students who were able to articulate what it is that they were going to learn, how they were going to learn it, and how they were going to demonstrate that understanding. And so at that time, it was more anecdotal, and then since then, district administration has shifted, board members have shifted, and there hasn't been a revisit to any metrics that we were using to measure those programs.
Okay, thank you. Do you all have an application? Do all three schools have an application for your PLP programs? And do those applications include recommendations from fifth grade teachers or teachers at the elementary school? Or is it different school to school? No recommendations? And do students ever get turned away? Other than maybe if there's a lottery?
Wait
Okay.
list.
When was the last time one of you had a lottery for a program?
So we have not had a lottery, but we have had to say, like, after the window is closed, and then we have waitlisted students just because of staffing reasons.
Okay.
But we have not, to my knowledge, I don't know anything about a lottery.
We have not had a lottery since the inception of Compass. And one of the pieces is also that maybe was unclear, maybe you're wondering, is to be into a Compass Flight or Quest, you must be accepted into the building if it's choice first, And for some of our buildings, students and families are choosing buildings, not programs.
Okay. So why is there an application?
So the application process started at the initial design. When we first started advertising Flight, we had students and parents who were very apprehensive about what the program would be or what it even was. And so we wanted a commitment from students as a first step of developing that student agency, as well as parents of understanding that what they were signing on for was going to be different than the legacy model. And then that application process had just continued beyond that. The Flight Academy did run a lottery the first couple of years because the number of applications far exceeded the capacity of the program. But since it had leveled out, they have not had that.
That makes sense. I'm just curious, and I don't know if it's for the principals or for the administration. We measure everything. And I think there are a lot of parents in the room that probably know the forward exam scores of their students in 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. So why don't we have that information available?
Are you asking why we don't have the information available for students that are participating?
The question about how students do in the program, like why don't we feel why don't we have that access to that information?
Well, we could get access to it. The thing about it is, for some of the students, we have to actually hand calculate averages because these are students that are enrolled in a school. The PL programs are not schools by themselves, and so we don't get the compiled data. We can definitely hand mine it, but hand mining data always leaves room for error. So some of the data that we did show at the parent meeting last night was regarding the percentage of students that were meeting their growth goal as compared to other students that are performing at the same level. All of that has to be hand mined. For some of the rosters that are for the teachers, they might have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students on those rosters. So when trying to determine the percentage of students meeting certain growth goals, not only do you have to separate the students by grade level, but then also compute the average of their growth or their proficiency in the same manner. So yes, we can do it, but it's subject to some human error and requires us some time to do it.
Some nuances to that question as well. Some students that are in programs may be accessing course outside of those programs, in turn integrated 1 or 2 or biology that aren't delivered. So you'd be mining out part of their day compared to their whole day, compared to a student who may have been in the program for all 3 years or a single or 2 years.
I'm struggling with how we can have insight to the socioeconomic status of the students in the program, but not the academic performance of the students in the program. So that for me is something that I think we need to see whatever we can see about that. I think that's an important piece of information that we as a board need to have. It may be difficult to get it for all participants, but I do think it would be valuable for those students who went 3 years through those programs. I suspect it's going to look different school to school. At what I'm hearing and understanding and personally have experienced is that there are different reasons why parents choose these programs for their students. In some cases, it's because the sibling is there. It may not be that the personalized learning is the right fit for everybody, but I think it would be important that we understand that. I can understand that maybe we don't have all the way through their high school performance because it's hard to track them, but I do think that we need to understand what the average student in one of these programs will know. There's a lot of student level diversity in these programs in terms of learning style and the reason why they're there. But I think that's going to be really important, valuable information for me to have. I don't know that it's necessarily going to tell us, well, students in this program are doing academically better than students in the rest of the school, because based on some of the other data that you shared around the profiles of the students in the programs is that I might expect there's there's certain trends and outcomes that are consistent with what we're seeing in the forward exams and some of the different categorical outcomes in forward. But to me, that's important. I think we should try to get that. The other question that I had, and this one is for Mrs. Gennaro in particular, where did 9 students go in 1 year? So you had 1 year where you had nine 7th graders who left the program. Where did they go?
They went back into the house model.
Do we know why? That's a lot. That's like 25% of the program that bailed.
Well, one of the data pieces I didn't share is that when I looked at the cohorts over time, there were groups of 6th graders, like the group of 6th graders that started in 19, over their 3 years at Butler, 3 students chose to leave after 6th grade and 3 more left after 7th. And we continued to see kids leaving consistently between 7th and 8th grade. So I know one of the pieces that came up was the whole idea that once they get to 8th grade, a lot of times it doesn't feel as PL because they go off to integrated 1 or they go off to biology, so they're already like taking core classes outside of Quest. So they only would really be in Quest for social studies and science, and at that point, they just decided we'll transition into the regular population, I guess, because of they'll be going to high school next year. But that was a consistent trend that we've seen specifically at Butler. I can't speak to any of the other buildings.
I think maybe it was at Horning where I saw students were adding into the program over time. And how is that decision made if students are coming in?
That's a good question. Prior to my knowledge coming in, that wasn't done. I had a hard time like forcing someone to stay inside of a program or to not allow someone out of a program. And so that was something that so long as there was space and we had the ability, I allowed some movement between the two. We don't have a lot of it. We don't go around parading it and things like that, but there were some things that didn't work out on either side. And so that was a nice change of pace for some of those students.
I have more, but I want to take a break. Mr. Zenobia?
Thank you. Thank you. There's a lot to digest here. Having received a lot of emails over the course of the last couple of weeks and hearing about some of what was presented the other night in the FAQ document we got. There's a lot of questions, and I'm not sure how productive it is to go back and try, other than the data, which I would like to see myself. But I don't know how productive it is to go back to understand what did or didn't go wrong. One thing that I don't understand, this really is just a clarifying question for myself. When we say personalized learning and kids' choice, and that's not the same as an IEP, and that's not the same as a 504. But at some level, we're investing a resource to understand to personalize a kid's education plan, correct, for these students in these 3 areas. Is that what we're talking about, or no? We're not spending time to create some type of learning plan for the child necessarily. It's just the environment we're creating is personalized learning. Is that
We don't have a common understanding between the 3 sites about what is going on. One of them is multi-age, and the other 2 are somewhat personalized, but without the features of personalized learning. I think that I'd like to defer to Jeffrey about what the hope and the dream was when he started Flight in 2013, 10 years ago.
So when we started that program, each student had a learner profile that was developed and updated regularly, as well as we conferenced with every student at a minimum bi-weekly throughout the school day to check up on their progress. We also created a dynamic system that reported out to parents exactly where students were performing on continuums of content areas. And so that was really the driving force behind a lot of what we were doing in the program. As we continued to expand and enroll more students and expand our program offerings, we recognized that we needed something to help us manage that. So that's where there was an investment from the district to provide additional resources, training was a significant piece of making sure that all staff understood what personalized learning was as defined by the Institute for Personalized Learning. Currently, we do not have any staff members or administrators that are trained in the updated model of personalized learning. It has gone through many iterations since its inception, and we do not have any staff that are currently trained in the current model for personalized learning. So that is where it is hard for us as a system to define it, because we haven't had anybody who's been trained in the latest versions of it.
Did you have a question in regards to special ed, though? Because you
Not necessarily. It's really, I appreciate I appreciate you trying to answer my question. So what I'm getting at is, and I agree with the idea, and I know teachers do this in the classroom. They get to know their students. They try to understand how that student learns. But it sounds to me like this program was trying to develop a framework around each student, if you will, to understand how they learn and to advance them in that way, correct? I mean, that's, when we say personal learning, there were more resources and effort put into that, correct?
We spent
With
time
those
learning
students.
about students and what they were interested in, and then we worked with them to look at what they were demonstrating and how that would be able to accomplish or cross off standards or competencies.
Okay, so, and I don't know who would be opposed to that. So then my question is, why wouldn't we put that, and I'm not saying we don't, but to the level that was done in these programs, why don't we put that level into every student that comes here? And not just in middle school, but in elementary school. Why isn't that our focus? You know, and this isn't a criticism of the programs or anything. It's just, it seems like a lot of resources were spent, and that's not a criticism, but the resources were invested to do something, but kids by lottery were the only ones that got that advantage. And if we want to see achievement go up, that's the kind of thing we should be doing wherever we can, and with every student we can do it with. So I think that's a good thing, and a positive thing that was trying to be done. And if we could, put that across the entire district and at a much earlier level, I think we would have much greater success. And I know teachers trying to do that. It's not a criticism of who's in the classroom. So maybe that's another conversation. So, Mr. Taggy, you were there at the beginning. Is it fair to say then, you've seen this program of flight in these three programs run their course, and your recommendation now is to end them and move on. And the recommendation of all of it is to move on to something else, correct?
It is a joint administrative recommendation to sunset the programs, yes.
So collectively, what is your best solution now, moving forward from the five of you? What's the recommendation that, hey, this is the course we should take now?
I can speak for the team in saying that we all believe that all students deserve the opportunity to engage with a core, guaranteed and viable instructional opportunity in literacy, math, science, and social studies, and that the opportunity to explore passions, explore self-curated units of study would be something that we would like to explore through an elective, because within our guaranteed and viable instructional experience, there is the opportunity within that framework for independent inquiry, for collaborative inquiry. All of our instructional resources have very specific pathways and recommendations and developed supports for our teachers to utilize for that particular purpose. which not only supports the integration of all students that might be striving to access curriculum, but including all students that are accelerating beyond the curriculum.
I mean, I firmly believe that we have the talent, we have what looks like the curriculum coming in. We certainly have the passion and our staff to raise all boats. And I know that is everyone's goal. A lot of the solutions that were presented tonight, I know we haven't picked one, if that is what happens. They look great, but they seem vague. And if I were a parent with a child in one of these programs, I would want to know, how does my son or daughter get through this? How do they benefit if the program were to end? How does their academic experience either stay where it's at or improve? And I think that's obviously the goal we're all trying to achieve. We're just not sure exactly how we're going to get there yet. So I thank you for now.
Okay, I guess we did speak to that a little bit at the parent meeting with that the sunsetting was intended to not have incoming sixth graders access. Seventh and eighth graders would continue through the program till the end. So they would have that guarantee. We have teachers currently that are teaching in the program and outside of the program, and we can continue to do that so that we can allow those students to finish up their experience.
Mrs. Koenig.
All right. First of all, I want to go on the record to say, too, I'm a little bit shocked at the lack of data. I was around for the inception of this program. I saw it come into, Quest come into Butler. I was there watching the entire thing, the enormous amount of money and resources that were diverted from regular classrooms to go into these programs was astronomical. For a program, I guess, something that it was very experimental at the time, but there not to be any type of tracking, I guess, how is it going? How many of your kids coming out of there, are able to take AP classes? How many go on to colleges and trade schools? I mean, I guess I'm just shocked that the data is not there for something that was such a jewel of the district for many, many years, and a lot of money went into these programs. So I guess I'm a little surprised that we can't pull some of this together and look at it before making some of these decisions. I mean, at least for, if anything, to have some evidence of, pros or cons decision-making. So I'm a little bit surprised by that. I got a lot of emails from parents, as I know everyone else did, speaking very highly of and positively about, the programs, the three, and how well their kids have done. But I guess, and I've even on my way out 3 years ago, I could see that this was not the same program as when it was first, begun. It was different. I'm sure it's changed over the last few years as well. I know that staff and administration have not really been trained in I actually do know a lot about personalized learning. And I know that it's, like you said, staff maybe hasn't been trained. I feel like what the parents that are all, they're very positive for this program, I kind of feel like they really, from what I hear you saying, haven't had the true personalized learning experience. Is that a fair assessment? Over the last few years, what we're calling personalized learning at the different schools really isn't true personalized learning, by definition, right? For the most part. So I guess what I'm wondering is, what is it about these programs that have brought these parents here, that have motivated them to email us to defend? What is it they're getting then? I guess if they're not getting the personalized learning experience, what is it that their students are benefiting from that they're here fighting for? I guess can any of you what do you think that is the motivation? What what are they fighting for, I guess, if it's not personalized learning? Because clearly that sounds like it's not it's really not by definition what their students are getting. So what are the?
I think it was pretty loud and clear at the parent meeting, the family atmosphere, the community atmosphere that was created, that small environment. I think they appreciated an opportunity to kind of loop where you have the same teachers. There isn't that transition from year to year. It was a very emotional response from one perspective, having not lived any other perspective. So we can have, if you would ask parents in our other houses, for example, like our sixth grade houses, they might have very similar experience that they would come and be very passionate about as well, and they've only lived that experience. So it's hard to compare because if they've only seen one, they don't know what they're missing in the other and vice versa. So I do feel like it was very much that family, smaller community piece, which we do build in with our house model, and we've brought back the advisory. So we are doing a lot of things to shrink the school, if you will, especially at Butler, because we are pretty large.
So the things that we didn't have years ago that made this attractive are now, I want to say universal, but I guess more commonplace, that's the way things are set up. So you're right, I can understand then that maybe they might not have that perspective. I do have to say, though, as a parent, the timing of how this rolled out to me was I mean, when I look at the dates when this was presented and how rapidly it was presented and how there really didn't seem like there was a chance for, feedback from the parents, what I saw tonight with data was much clearer, but I understand that that's not what was seen the other night. So I can understand how a parent would feel being told we're going to sunset the program, but really not understanding the whole picture. So it's much clearer to me now. I do understand their concern, though, and that feeling of, I guess, no one asked us how we felt. I completely understand that. Maybe with a little bit more information now we're hearing tonight, they might have a better picture. I guess, something I'm wondering, so you said that North, the program has kind of been discontinued, the Inquire, I think it was, Aspire?
Aspire.
Okay.
Aspire.
Because that was developed while I was still at Butler teaching. So at this point, if the students are in this, I'll say personalized learning, I'll use that loosely because again, I'm not sure that's where we're at with this, but after they leave 8th grade, there's nowhere for them to really go to continue this model because traditional high school doesn't, other than what West has, the Trek, which my son did, and he enjoyed that. It was like that elective class, and he did all sorts of cool things, coding, he loved it. It was great. So I'm a proponent for that. But other than that, they go into a traditional high school, and then ultimately a traditional college or trade school, which there's no personalized learning involved in there. Trust me, I have 3 kids that go through college. It's anything but. You're going to get to do what you want when you want. So I understand, that if there's nowhere for this to progress, it is a concern. But I also understand how the parents feel having this rolled out the way it was. And so and without the information that was provided tonight. I guess that was just my question. I feel like this really isn't personalized learning as by definition. In order to continue this, you would have to, I think one of you said it, you would have to go through a rigorous training. You would have to decide, okay, if we're going to keep this, if we're going to do personalized learning, this is the way it has to be done. And the staff would have to be trained, administration would have to be trained, resources. It's a big undertaking, but we also have brand new curriculums, and I understand that as well. And that, and I guess I don't know if those worlds can be merged to have personalized learning, yet here's what you have to learn. And again, that's state standards. That's not, what just Waukesha has decided. I think I get the impression that a couple times it was said, well, now that, the board implemented these new policies, it really isn't just that the board has implemented new policies. We have state standards we have to adhere to. And I think, like I said, with no evidence of how the programs have been doing that and how they've been faring with regard to those standards. It's hard to argue to continue on a program that we're really not sure of what we're doing at this point. So that's kind of just my observations.
So thank you. Does anybody mind if I come back for a second? So I've got a couple more thoughts, but first of all, I'm not trying to ask gotcha questions. I'm really just trying to understand what all we have in front of us, and I recognize and I appreciate that all of you are sitting here as leaders of your middle schools, telling us that you think we can provide a better educational experience for all of our students in a world where these programs don't exist. I think we're all trying to come to terms with what that means for the parents in the room, for us as board members who I think are going to be asked possibly to make a very difficult decision. And so all that data is really important. I don't think I'm going to get out of this conversation without putting on the table the fact that I was a Quest parent and I was a non-Quest parent. And that was a conscious decision. That doesn't mean that my personal experience or my children's personal experience is the same or different from anybody else's. It just means that I understand how we felt when we chose that program. I understand how we felt when we learned that it was very difficult to move out of that program because of the way that the curriculum was structured. I understood that we had certain expectations about high math being accessible to students, and it wasn't, whether we were in Quest or whether we weren't in Quest. So I think that we as a district have a responsibility to help parents understand what we can do for their high-achieving students. My family's been living the middle school dream for about 6 years now, which means, there's a lot of hormones in our house, but
I've lived it for 30.
yeah, I'm not envious. And I appreciate you for that. Thank you. We're ready to have, the last 6 months behind us, but there are reasons why that transition is so difficult, especially the first time, right? I understand that, and I felt that. What I experience when I'm hearing is that it's an experience, it's a culture, it's a family. It's not the curriculum, but that flexibility is important for some students. And what I don't love is the idea of the personalized learning elective, because I also know that there aren't a lot of electives to work with in middle school. But I will also admit that I was not a big fan of the house model when the house model was introduced. I probably grilled some of you on that topic as well, but I wasn't a big fan. And when it was first kind of coming together, it was a little sloppy, and it was a little bit, and I think, Mrs. Koenig, I know you were at Butler when the house things were kind of starting, and but what I've seen in that progression over the last couple years is that house model is actually very similar to what was happening in the Quest environment, but not in that room. And again, I'm not trying to defend one way or the other. I just, I know that sometimes there's this fear or this misunderstanding that you want a certain thing and you only know that thing, and then you don't realize that there's actually some other options. I think the curriculum that's being put in place is very, it's evidence-based, it's high quality, it's sequenced. I am concerned about what happens in the PLP programs when students do want to move out of the sequence because the off-ramping is difficult. All that said, the idea of sunsetting these and letting sixth graders kind of ride out the 3-year, by the time our incoming sixth graders get to the end, the experience isn't the same. So I do think also, I think we need to think a little bit about if that is the recommendation, like what does that really mean for somebody who is, especially maybe at Les Paul, if you're one of 6 kids that's just kind of riding it out to the end, And our experience was that eighth grade in the PLPs was not that different from eighth grade in what some people are very inappropriately calling Gen Pop. I don't like that expression, so let's not use that. But it wasn't that different because a lot of kids are moving out for science classes and math classes and then the other thing I just have to put on the table too is so we had 3 middle school starts in a 4-year period. And there was a time when actually Mr. Poczynski, who's now the principal at STEM Elementary, when he was the district math coordinator, just did a fantastic job of transitioning kids from 5th grade to 6th grade. And when we as a district are actively working with families on that transition, I think the kids are able to kind of plan that math trajectory and be a little bit more prepared when they come in. But what I'm seeing more of now is that students are coming in maybe halfway through a year or half ready for 7th grade math. And so I know we've done some things with the 6, 7 and some different pacing, but I've said this before, like we have to start the math planning with our families in 4th and 5th grade if they're going to be successful in that path in 6th, 7th, 8th. And that is my biggest concern. I am confident that there are enough students in this district to fill integrated math 1 and 2 classes in the middle schools. Because I know they can do it. And I see the outcomes in the elementary schools, and yet we haven't created that path for those kids to get there. And then we're struggling with putting classes together. I have a student who had to take eAchieve Math in 8th grade because there wasn't a class. I had a student who had a full class of geometry because that management of students through that 5th, 6th, 7th grade process was done so unbelievably well. So we need consistency in that because I know that we have kids who can do the higher level math. But that's not the only priority, right? The average student in our district is not worried about integrated math, right? They're worried about other social things that, we need to support them in as well. So I guess now I'm the one kind of on the dialogue here, but I appreciate the more information that you brought tonight. It was very helpful. And maybe I just have one last question that's specifically with the Horning families, because we've heard from a lot of flight families tonight, and I don't want to in any way disregard what the Compass and the Quest families are saying. But I've heard, and we know a lot of people in the district who are saying if flight wasn't available to my child, I wouldn't be sending them to Horning. So Mr. Klanowski, what do you say to those parents?
Yeah, it's a good question, because sending your child into a building, any building, it's a big deal, and there's a large amount of trust and responsibility that goes with it, and that goes to all of ours. We've been working really, really hard, and I'm not going to say like everything is where it needs to be, because it's not. Like, it's a work in progress of when I came in and the work that we're continuing to do. So we've really spent a lot of time looking at, like, when, Jamie was over here talking about the school improvement plans or SAIL plans, and Jen also mentioned those as well. So some of the things that we are working on is we have really 3 pillars for our improvement. One is around numeracy, so math, literacy, and then we're also working on the culture piece. So that's around behavior. So one of the things after my first year there, I noticed is that we had a lot of things that we needed to work on, and it was not where I wanted to be, and it's still not where I wanted to be. But the progress that we've made, one of the big things that said, like, my building is going to be working on utilizing PBIS, which is a system to explicitly teach behaviors and also how to support positive behaviors. That does not mean discipline goes out the window, by the way. That's still there, but we can't also just discipline our way out of every single problem. And so what we've worked on really, really hard is to make sure that we are explicitly teaching those behaviors and modeling those behaviors and acknowledging the good things that are going on. We started doing some rec nights. We've anecdotally, like, the lunchrooms are much, much better last year. I can say last year they weren't anywhere where they needed to be, and we've seen some massive improvements. I love going to lunches this year, and middle school lunch is not always the most fun place to be sometimes, and we've seen some really great improvements on that front. The other thing I would say that I really appreciate is the fact that I started having these thoughts and these dialogues with myself, and then having two team members. I said, look, these are the things that I'm seeing that we need to work on that are huge gaps in this building here. And I brought up, I said, whether you want to come with me or not, I'm going on this journey to bring this into the building because of the needs that were there. And I'm thankful that both of them decided, yeah, this is something that they also want to work on. Is it a silver bullet? No, it's not. And it's something that will help with a certain level of the percentages. I think that, if you dive into it further, and I think it's probably a good thing to do that, is to look at some of what our building looks like and what our different programs look like. And quite frankly, they look radically different. And I think that needs to be said. And I think the question that we need to ask ourselves is, are we okay with that? And if we are okay with some of the data that you saw there, and there's more behind that, then so be it. Then that's what we believe in, and we're okay with separating students the way that they are separated. If we're not okay with it, then we need to find out some different ways forward. But I think that's also what is being said, whether it's being said out in the open or not. So that's the work that I'm working on. I've got a great team that's working on it. We have phenomenal educators. Doesn't matter what program they are in. I'm really proud of the work they're doing. It's not always easy. Middle school is tough, even in the best of situations, and we've got a lot of work to do, and it's certainly not done yet. And this is just a piece of the path forward to making Horning a much, much better place. And so that's the end of the day for my staff. I really want it to be a great place to work and to learn. And for our students, I want it to be a safe place to work and to learn. And that's my goal, and that's what I'm working on. And there's going to be hiccups along the way, but I think we made great strides, especially this year, but we're not there yet.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
I just have one clarifying piece. We've asked for, data has been the benchmark, right? And all of us make data or use data to make decisions. And my concern is the questions that we're asking to prepare, do we understand what we're asking you to prepare? Unfortunately, like so many other curriculums that have been implemented, chasing the new shiny object doesn't always equate to the follow-up and the management and the KPIs and the metrics and the data and the analysis, and telling me at the end of the day, we're 10 years out. Okay, so 10 years we put this in, and at some point along the way, I'm going to say about year 4, we stopped measuring. So for 6 years, we've been flying blind, and now I'm asking you to share with us data that we don't have to try to make a decision. And I just want to make sure we are all rowing the same way as what are we expecting the data, what are we asking? And do you understand what has been asked by several of the board members on data? We know there's no high school data. I think that's virtually impossible to chase a child's career based on all of the different programs. But is the ask correct to say, can we find a population of students at each school that maintained 3 years within the program to see how they scored? Is that fair to ask? What we're asking them to give us data to make a decision on a program that we haven't managed. And I just want to make sure that what we're asking is fair and we can somehow try to get it.
So looking for an incoming 6th grader years ago that went all the way through the program and what their success was, would we be looking at if they accessed outside of math or
I'm actually throwing that at you like spaghetti sticks to a wall.
Right.
Because I realize that the ask is extremely challenging.
Yeah.
And if you're being asked to give us data to make a decision, I struggle. The balance here is, am I asking you to do a lot of work that is going to prove to me or prove to us to make a decision that we already know is inevitable? And by that, I'm not saying that the decision, we just know this has not been a metric managed, data-driven synopsis. Mm-hmm. And we know that the results, when we take a look over the last 3 years, as on a global scale, we have 60% of our kids that are not proficient, whether they're in the general population or they're in one of these personal learning programs.
And I greatly appreciate that question and the clarity to try to find that. And I think to Mr. Zenobio's point too of the access for students, I know there was data points collected years ago that have not been collected about, as Mr. Klenowski shared, the discrepancy of programming to building, where buildings may have very much represented the whole building within a program, and where they're completely discrepant of who is in what and where and when and why.
And I'm open for interpretation. I mean, I think we all are. We all want to see data. Data drives decisions. Okay?
Just to follow up on that, I know it's getting late and I apologize. I appreciate you all staying and I know there's a lot of parents still with us. I think one thing that would help is to understand what type of students are choosing this program. And like I mentioned before, I do think that there are, in some cases, there are just siblings that come along, not just, but siblings that come along to the program and they might not be the best fit for a personalized learning program. But we don't know. And then I think, as I mentioned, like this is an experience, not necessarily a curriculum. The question is, can we bring the curriculum into the experience, or do we bring the experience into the broader curriculum? And either way, I think that's going to be a hard sell for people who have in mind what they want, that experience that they want for their children. So I think it would be useful to know what types of students, and it sounds like there's a whole wide spectrum, right? And I also think that there are some myths about who's choosing it or why they would choose it that is the result of perhaps how we've handled our honors and gifted and talented programming across the district, because I think there are a lot of parents that don't know what to do with a high-achieving kid when they get out of an elementary school where the teachers have intimate knowledge of who they are and what they're capable of, and then they're kind of thrown into the big pool. So that would be helpful to understand if that looks different than what's happening in the rest of the school. And then I think, again, as far as the recommendation, from what I could tell, looking back several years, there was no recommendation brought to the board to discontinue gifted and talented programming. It just stopped. Mr. Zenobia?
Well, to that point, does anybody recall if this was a board decision to implement these programs? At the time?
It was not something that the board had oversight over at the time that it was developed, so it did not require board approval.
Yeah.
And I can speak as being the only administrator still there when those were occurring, that when they were launched at the other sites, it was not a board approval of those sites either.
I did not get board approval to close the dual language habitat. North didn't either. The principal made the decision.
Mrs. Koenig?
Just two quick questions. The first one, I just lost the first one. I'm so sorry. I was just thinking about what you said and it went out of my mind. Never mind.
We can come back to it. Was approval related or?
No, it was something
Okay.
else. I was just thinking about the approval rating and then that threw it out.
Okay.
I just thought of one. So, to your knowledge, are there any, a lot of parents have said if the programs are discontinued or sunsetted, they're not going to choose Waukesha schools, they're going to go somewhere else. Is there any districts, to your knowledge, around us that have a fully functioning, true personalized learning program that parents would send their kids to? By all definitions, a personalized learning program that you're aware of that is successful?
So I guess I would say that question is really hard to answer because our district has not been involved in the evolution of personalized learning with the Institute of Personalized Learning. So we don't have the knowledge base within our system to even define personalized learning ourselves, so I think it would be hard to speak to if we believe there's a program that's currently doing it.
That's fair enough. And then the second one is, I know it takes a lot for you all to cohesively get together and decide you'd like to sunset, this program. So I know you believe in it. My question is, what's the one benefit you feel by sunsetting this program? What do you think, in your perspective, is the biggest positive that is going to come out of this? Like, have you discussed that? Like, what's something that's really a positive thing that by sunsetting this, what's the yellow, the Emerald City? What's important? What's coming out of this?
We'll have a community of learners, a community of educators that are working for one common goal, to provide the best opportunity for all the parents who are sitting behind us, for every single kid. That's what we are tirelessly working for right now.
Fair enough.
Yep. I would frame it as two things. One would be is that, I believe pretty passionately about guaranteed valuable curriculums. I think that's one of the most important things that we can do. Not the most important, but it's up there. I think the other thing would be is that Horning has a hashtag, and I don't know if you've seen it, but the hashtag is #OneHorning. There's a reason why we have that hashtag. I didn't put that in place, but there's a reason for that, and that is because right now we are a divided building, and I think moving forward that would help with our culture to move forward as a building of learners, as opposed to the massive separated system and the things that brings with it, which we see every day in the building. And so that is something where I would like to have a more unified building.
Thank you for saying that, because I think they all need to hear that, what your reasoning is, and I think everyone listening needs to understand, why this is coming to fruition and why you're moving on this proposal.
So, did you have anything else?
One last question. You mentioned the elective option. How would the elective work if we still have the same board policies and the same challenges with PL? I'm just wondering how that would even work as an option.
That's a great question. So all courses need to have a guaranteed scope and sequence, a syllabus, a curriculum which is approved by this committee. So what we would do is we would bring forth an elective opportunity that would have those elements within it that could be approved by this teaching and learning committee. There isn't the same statute around electives as there are with core instructional learning. So we do not have to follow particular guidelines as it relates to specific content, which all students in 8th grade, 4th grade, 6th grade have to receive in the state of Wisconsin. Having said that, there is a variety of ways that we could flexibly work in developing the same type of elective which currently exists on the books at West High School, but is also firmly ingrained in the STEM experience through their STEAM opportunities. I don't see that as being a challenge at all. It would very likely integrate the areas of career and technical education as standards, could integrate art. There's a variety of ways that we could be creative with this.
So the Trek elective at West is an approved curriculum with a syllabus, scope and sequence.
It's on the books now, so I'm assuming it was approved by the board that was in place probably 8 years ago when it was developed.
These policies governing curriculum, though, aren't new, right? They've been there for a while.
They were not in place, though, at the start of the
beginning.
Programs.
Just since we're here, so the elective piece, again, I am concerned that there's already a problem with middle schoolers with limited flexibility around electives. I also think, I think the PLP experience itself is the personal learning project, right? That it's built around that, and it lasts a long time. And it's probably the most inspiring thing to see in these programs is when these kids choose a topic and they dig in and they learn that process of learning something that they're really passionate about, which makes me kind of wonder why that has to be an elective experience versus, again, with the house models that we have, the way that literacy and social studies and even math in some cases are integrated together in the houses. It seems like we have the flexibility to build that in without it being something that a student maybe has to trade off band or Spanish or tech ed for, because those are also all amazing experiences. And so I'm just curious why it has to be an elective.
In years past, the Learning Center course that was on the books at the mid-level worked in cohesion with the house model. So I can speak for our building. I know Kent and Laura weren't part of that, but it worked opposite of an elective, so students had the opportunity for both. And they were able to accomplish both, and then those personalized projects were done in passion nights, and they were a course of a year of study to deliver, and it was a community experience. So if you've been in Les Paul, can you imagine 2,500 people walking through student presentations based on those passions that worked in cohesion with the house model and their Learning Center experience? So it has been done, it went away, and it could come back.
I think I recall too about that was a guaranteed experience for all learners, so it wasn't an elective. That was what Learning Center was, and everybody took it.
Okay. Yeah. That's really helpful. I mean, obviously, there's history, things change, right? The one thing I've learned about public education, though, is you can't stop anything. So you can start a bunch of things, but you can't stop anything. And so we need to understand what that means, right? If we're going to shift, if we're going to change things. And I do appreciate the thoughtful dialogue and responses you all have brought to us tonight. So obviously, as a follow-up to the full board, this is a topic that will move to our meeting next Wednesday. It's discussion here tonight, so there'll be discussion there. I do think we'll get some additional questions. I don't know that there's ever good timing to have these kinds of conversations, but I think in particular, the timing of this conversation is, the opposite of good. So, so where do we go from here? What is your ask of us, and how do we do it at a time like this?
Yeah, so, I mean, I first of all really appreciate the conversation with everybody, here, and even people who spoke earlier today. The request would be to, just given everything discussed tonight, that to bring this forward again at the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting in January. If the board would see that as acceptable at this point. And at that point, we could discuss any discussion or additional information, possible action. But I just wanted to leave it there based on our conversation tonight, where the board was feeling with the acceptable idea of moving forward and further conversation.
I think there's still some unclear pieces to this, based on some of the concerns that we've raised tonight. Ms. Kozlowski.
So recommendation, right, it's always going to be the data points. So further data was a request.
Yep.
That would be, and I think it's the next steps. Okay, so paint me the picture. So I have a child in 7th grade. I have a child in 8th grade. If I am a parent, I'm asking you to help me understand the limbo that I think my child is in. What does that look like? How does that feel? How do I have comfort that all of that? I have a good understanding as to what that looks like because I understand the curriculum that I would suspect that they're going to, which I think is really great. They don't. And that is the piece that we need to make sure that they fully embrace and understand what this means. Here's how that will look. I think the other comments were, it all depends on enrollment. So in the sunset, what we know is just based on some of the discussions that coming into that 8th grade mark, they're already signing out into the general curriculum and pre-high school. How does that look? How do you get that? And then when you've got A, B, and C years, that for me is my biggest concern, is that we can sunset, but we can't leave them behind. And so we need to understand who's in the program, what is that plan, and as a parent, that is how do I lift them up and make sure that they fully understand what the next steps are for their child. And I think that part has been the part that's gray. For me, the data points on trying to show that they're more successful or less successful, if I'm looking at an overall composite score, I can tell you, you're gonna go through all this work, I know what the outcome is gonna be. It's an ask, so the committee wants the ask. But then help us understand, my child, what does that mean? What are my next steps? Starting next year, how does that look? How does that feel? How do I have comfort that my kid is not gonna get left behind and will actually, what we know, will thrive? And then I think so discussion, and we'll see where that goes.
Based on the conversation, I do have some notes. I know Dr. Siebert was taking some notes too, as far as some of those additional data pieces that we can follow up and just talk more about some of those points to bring back and share with you as a team.
Have parents reached out to you, principals, directly or individually, or some? I see some.
I've had a few, yes.
Okay.
No, I said I have, yes. I have heard from some, yes.
We each heard from one directly.
Okay. I mean, I do think we're probably least equipped to answer all the questions, although we want to be able to answer those questions. So before making this kind of decision, we need to answer those questions. But I do think that that's important. If there are specific questions about individual situations, right? How is my child going to X, Y, and Z? What does that transition look like? What does that path look like? I think those are things that need to be directed specifically to the schools and in the context of those programs. So, sorry. But, and if you're not getting those questions, then I kind of wonder why. I mean, I do think that that's important. That's an important part of it. Yeah. So this is kind of an impossible next step, but I guess we meet early in January. So our first committee meeting of the year is like the day we come back from the holiday break.
I believe it's January 2nd.
Okay.
That's the Tuesday.
Okay. So I think before we depart, I mean, it is only December 5th today, so there's time, but we probably just need to understand what that timeline looks like, because there's a lot happening in there. And and at this point, I think I'll be curious to see what enrollment looks like, but.
Yeah, we'll have a little bit of just reflection and, touch base on the list that we have as far as notes, and then start working on kind of next steps in preparation for that.
Okay. All right. Everybody wants to go home. That's it? I don't see it. Are any recommendations for future meetings? Okay. With that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for being here and for all of the time that